Okay, episode 3. Hashtag cancelconor. Begin. Okay, so always start this with word of the day. Zeitgeist is the word of the day today. So, the spirit of the time or general trend of a thought or feeling characteristic of a particular period of time. So, we'll see if we can work that in.
Okay.
You know, if it comes up naturally, like it totally will. So, how are you doing today?
Good. This is new.
I know,
enjoy
right?
it.
It's a fun time. So everything seems to be working. I actually got things recording properly this time, I think.
Live and learn.
I know, right? That's kind of the way it goes. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Us as in, hopefully somebody else listens to this once in a while.
Oh gosh, yes. Well, born in Calgary. I've lived in this province my whole life. Moved out to Cochrane to do basically my whole schooling from grade 2 out in Cochrane, so small town mostly.
Okay.
Parents are Canadian, kind of scattered. And yeah, lived in a small kind of bubble, but knew I wanted to travel the world and got exposure through many avenues. How do I sum that up? Really, who I am is because of my parents. Obviously, well, a lot of them. But I go with the nurture and the nature. And learning from my mom about the environment, learning from, like, she was a farmer, so knowing where your food came from. So that really moved me into natural science.
Okay.
And that's really a root of who I am on, like, environmental awareness. So after high school, my bio teacher said I couldn't get a degree in ecology. And I was like, I think that's a lie because,
Yeah.
And he's 25.
Oh.
And, and I looked at, went to Mount Royal, small school, got the field experience, learned that environmental science was opening up, and that fit every passion. Like, learn about the environment, got to travel, field experience, and lab experience. That's a tough answer. To kind of sum up who you are, but vegetarian, then that led into an eco business that I've been working on for the past 2 years.
Yeah, well, as far as, since I've known you, you kind of seem to be a very eco-conscious, sustainability kind of person. So you're not, I've noticed that you've doing the vegetarian, vegan thing, whatever sort of thing, that you're not pushy about it though, which is kind of rare, honestly. But it's good because you understand the process and why other people, in fact, do it as well, sort of thing too, right? So, yeah, and that's kind of the cool thing, because I mean, there's definitely ways and things that can be done. And I grew up on a farm too, and I had meat pretty much every meal all the time, and partly because it's bogging down on my guts and stuff is part of it. But you're actually one of the reasons why I think more that, you know, at least partial vegetarianism is, at minimum, is a good idea. So like one meal a day at most, a lot of the time, is meat. Or if I could just go for a couple weeks, sort of thing like that. And
That's awesome.
yeah, and I think it's kind of interesting that there's so many different ways to eat. I mean, you look throughout the world, and there's a lot of people that simply don't have the option to have meat, but they eat and have amazing foods all the same. So
Yeah, we eat very limited. There's over 20 subspecies of kiwi. We only eat one.
yeah, exactly, right? So there's definitely an opportunity to, it's kind of the nice part about it is that your palate becomes more worldly then, because instead of looking at it as a hindrance, looking at it as an opportunity to explore other cultures or learn to be a better cook yourself or what have you, sort of thing. And I mean, I'm fairly physically active, and it's not like I've lost any energy by going more plant-based, sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, just got to be smart about it.
Yeah, so I had an interesting past, starting when I was 8, going to PEI to see my dad's family, Maritimes. I never liked the smell of fish, still can't stand it. But I had like a pet lobster because they had live ones, and so like I befriended it. It was, yeah, and then time for dinner, and so my dad took it. I stayed in the room crying all dinner, and then I had to come down because they forced me to, and then my dad gave me the shell of it. And I was like, gee, thanks. This was alive a couple minutes ago. And then, like, I think a year later or so, we were at Nova Scotia, and they were like big tuna. Never seen a tuna that big. Just, yeah, isolated. It came from a can, not an actual big fish.
Yeah.
Saw that get chainsawed to pieces, and things were flying, blood everywhere, and I was like, hey, if this is what comes in the can, I don't want it. And that was the only thing I can bear. Salmon, no, not really. And like, even I had the shrimp in my mouth, and I was like, it's an insect, I can't, like.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. I think I only had like squid thing, like
calamari?
Not the full calamari, but like just the rings. I guess that's
okay.
part of it, but
yeah,
that was okay. But yeah, I was aware, and I was like, I didn't want to, yeah, it seemed weird to me. And then at 10 at the cake, eating ribs, because I actually really enjoyed ribs, and I was like, yeah, I want to be a vegetarian. And my family was like, you can't eat what you're eating. I was like, oh, okay.
Well, tomorrow I'll start.
Yeah, well, still kind of wanted. My mom was pushing back. She was like worried about my health again, like being inactive. Like I was in volleyball and basketball, so like having the calorie count.
You were how old at this time?
I was 10, and then about 12. At 12, I watched a PETA video, and I was like crying, being very empathetic. I was like, I can't support that. And since then, I've stuck with it. 15 years ago.
Oh wow, that's pretty awesome. You look healthy, so you're doing something right.
Yeah. And in anthropology, I learned you get new bone structure every 7 years.
Yeah. It
rejuvenates, so I was like, I kind of like that. And learn more about martial arts, too. It's like, okay, you gotta condition the body and, like, gotta fill in nutrients. So, yeah, it just made me more aware of, like, don't put junk in my body. I don't want to have that, like, it doesn't feel very well. And maximize.
Yeah, and that's actually a huge thing about it too, is that it's, well, like you're making the point of, you know, like all these allowable toxins that we put in our bodies and stuff, and sugar is actually one of the worst ones, and nobody even looks at it that way because it's in everything for the most part, or corn syrup or some, you know, sweet derivative of something. And I mean, that's part of the reason why people's weight are skyrocketing. And they started the whole low fat or no fat trend in late 70s, early 80s for the most part, and then people's weights just started skyrocketing because you're taking the natural fats out of foods like yogurt and stuff like that your body can definitely process, or most people at least anyways, and you're taking all the fat out, and then it doesn't taste like anything, so you have to replace it with sugar. And it's not as filling for one, but I mean, like a calorie is not a calorie, depending on like where it's coming from. If it's like a plant source thing, or a animal sourced, or a milk product, or grains or nuts or something, like they all have different ways that they're processed because of all the other parts of that are in them, sort of thing too. So that's a big part of what happens. Yeah, and you eat a 0% yogurt as opposed to like a 10 or 11% yogurt. I mean, one has way more staying power. The other one makes you feel weird after. I find, at least, anyway. So.
Yeah, and I've been looking more into like even what aspartame does for you, and it like hits the sugar, but then your body doesn't recognize it, so like you still crave it. And I was talking this with the manager at the store. Like, he tried to cut down on sugar, and I think he went like 3 days without added sugar, and like he felt like he was very depressed, like very moody, and then he's like, I just need to do something. So like the next day, on the 4th day, he had like a bowl of like Lucky Charms, and he's like, I feel great. And he's just like, okay, what did I do in these past days? And then realized, it's like, okay, I'm addicted to sugar.
Yeah.
And like, luckily growing up, my mom never like bought pop or anything, like very, very rare that we had. And like, even though apple juice isn't the greatest, they say it's the same, like, as more sugar as a can of Coke. And it's like, oh, well, okay, like, water, I guess. But he's like, you want more than water sometimes. But yeah, just being aware of like, yeah, even at a golf course, hot sunny day, didn't have much time to eat, what'd I do? Like, grab a Coke, and I, like, within a shift, I had, like, 4 glasses, and I was like, oh, feel my teeth, all that sugar, and I'm like, okay, I need to be aware of this.
Yeah, very true. Well, and that's nice to have these ones, actually, that they're sugar-free, so that's kind of the nice part about it, kind of being aware of that sort of thing, too, but I've noticed that, too, like, somebody has one of those, whatever, like, 3/4 of an inch icing on their cake, sort of thing like that, and it's like, okay, I'll have this with a cup of coffee or whatever, but you bite into it and it's like it hurts your teeth. Like, oh, that's why I don't eat this very often.
Yeah, and we were talking like a week or so ago about like just fast food and like your body craving, and like it's tough to get off of it, and that's the cycle of poverty, and like malnutrition is like you get physically addicted to these fast food places. And again, just having that habit at a young age, like rarely even like just maybe every time we went to the mall for like back to school shopping, but even to this day, I like still like A&W Beyond Meat Burger, which is like a treat once in a while because they're bun, but like Opa or like shawarma. And so I was like, but you still have to watch like the secret things, like what Subway, the bread is not classified as bread because it's too much sugar.
Oh, geez.
And then they got caught with the preservatives, so they had to get rid of that. And then now the tuna, someone did a DNA test and found no tuna DNA in their tuna. I was like,
yeah,
food is not food, even though you thought Subway's fresh.
Yeah, in quotes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and that's always the funny thing, too, because it's like, well, how do we make more money? It's like, well, we can get a fish that's tuna-ish, and we can, mix it in with a bunch of other fillers and stuff like that. And yeah, because I think they got caught 10 years ago or so, too, with, was it their rib, whatever, because it's, like, pressed to look like a rib? Or maybe it was a chicken. It was a chicken. But it's technically still chicken because like it was 55% chicken meat and the rest was filler and whatever else sort of thing. So it's like, well, what is this filler exactly? And yeah, exactly like you say, I mean, you're supposedly eating fresh, and it's like, well, the tomatoes and lettuce and stuff is, I guess, but you gotta make that money, so how do you cut costs?
Yeah, I learned like gluing steaks was a thing, and I was like, okay, there's an argument when people say, like, compare the ingredients from a Beyond Burger. I was like, yeah, it's not the greatest, and I personally don't like the fake blood stimulation, but it helps the texture and it helps the ease in, like, substituting. Yeah. Really, that's the end goal, is, like, making it easy. If you have the choice and it tastes the same, why don't you choose it? But, yeah, there's other cases that there's filler, and just, like... And I read ingredients since I was 12, like, being really aware of it, and it gets confusing, and I think laws should be better at it.
Yeah.
Even working in cannabis, seeing all the labels and warnings, and they put all the health, like even the calories and everything in it. It's like, oh, this one actually has calories, but most don't. They're not required for it, which is a whole other thing I can go on to, but...
Yeah, well, and I guess that's kind of the other thing, though, too. I mean, they have calorie numbers on beer and stuff like that, but the harder alcohols like gin or whiskey or whatever, it's like, well, you're clearly not drinking this for the health. So don't worry about what's in here, really. It's a distilled liquor. It's government approved to not immediately kill you or make you go blind or something. So otherwise, like, we know why you're buying this. Like, let's not kid ourselves. So
yeah, just the comparison between, I guess it is still a new industry, but just kind of frustrating seeing one industry being highly regulated and then another one not.
Yeah, but that's the other part, though, too, is that, like you say, this is a brand new situation for cannabis, and it's, well, they're gonna find a lot what to do with it, because wherever they think they've got holes patched and rules covered and stuff like that, it's like, oh, by doing this way, it makes it, an exception for people on this way, or whatever it may be, as always is with certain things. I mean, going back to bad foods and stuff like that, I mean, you can buy a single donut and they'll tax it, but you buy 6 donuts and it's considered a meal, so it's not taxed. They're not the same way, at least, anyways, or it used to be.
Huh.
Yeah, it was weird. They've changed stuff like that now because everything's just taxed now, but it was interesting, like how they would just quantify certain things like that, and it's like, well, 6 donuts still isn't a meal, though. I mean, sure. I mean, I guess it's technically enough to feed a person, but that's not something that you want to live on necessarily, even. So.
And in marketing, and I was talking this with a coworker, in your mind, it's like, oh, I want to save the tax, so you're going to end up spending more, just not paying the tax. So it's like, but you're paying more than if you just paid the tax. But it's like, oh, but now I get 6 donuts instead of 1. You're like, oh, okay, well, you don't want to eat all of them, but...
Yeah. I'm actually saving my money by spending more of it.
Yeah, and I just witnessed that today too. But I was like, it's what you want. But just with YouTube, I know if you say the word cannabis, you get demonetized. So I don't know if you wanted to blurb that out, but I can also
matter.
Work it away into herb. Or
I don't think I'm going to make money on this, so I'm not worried about it.
Okay. I just know that's a thing too. I know Amazon changed their policy, and it just like, again, it's just like, if you're not testing other drugs, then why are you focusing on this? So it's an interesting.
Well, that's a weird one too, because it's legal in Canada, so in a lot of places in the States even, which are clearly our closest neighbor. But I don't know, that's one of those, I guess, again, it's a new industry. I mean, you can talk about getting shit-faced all day long on beer or whiskey or whatever, and nobody says anything about that. I mean, people sing songs about it, and billboards and in newspapers and on TV and everything, like, but no, don't smoke a joint, relax.
And that's been tough. Like, I tried being in the oil and gas industry and like living the corporate downtown. I was really excited for the field experience, but then that got cut with the pandemic. But it was interesting because literally the first day, it was a book club, and they got the permit to have beer. So I was like, okay, this is nice, chill day, first day drinking in the office. And then it's a weekly thing. Yeah, it's like, or a bi-weekly thing. And like literally had like drinks in the fridge. And at this time, this was in October or so. And then, I even asked, I was like, okay, with like legalization, because drinks were coming in October 2019. And I was like, oh, well, like I have a like prescription, like am I allowed to bring a CBD drink? And they're just like all looked at me. It's like, what? No, you can't have cannabis here. I was like, but it's legal. They're like, no, no. And I was like,
and it's a CBD one. It's not like the psychoactive parts are not there.
Yeah, but it's just the lack of education, the stereotypes, the propaganda behind it. And I was like, I get also our clients and things like that. And then I actually had to, to go in the field, I had to totally get off of cannabis. Starting New Year's. I stopped for 3 months until the pandemic hit in March. But it was just another thing, like conversations. Like, I physically can't take my prescribed medicine, even if it is CBD, because the urinalysis test they do test the byproduct of it. So it's not even testing the act of, like, you smoke that weekend or whatever. It's testing up to 3 months.
Yeah.
And that's the hardship. And, like, I even bought, like tests to see how long my body reacts to about a month. And so it's like, and some people it's longer, but it's just like, this makes no sense. And it was a whole thing, and I was like, it's partly it's discriminatory, but it just, it's like, it was two-sided. I was like, drinks no problem, you can party 4 a.m. Literally had a coworker have 4 glasses of wine, drive home, even though we had taxi vouchers. Everything is all about safety. Told my manager about it, nothing was dealt with because it was a party. It was fine.
Don't be a snitch. Nobody likes a snitch.
But that was the thing. I was just like, I'm in this like system that I didn't agree with, and I'm sure everyone, like, some people experience that as well. But just like, what a culture! Like, and I was reading up on like how things came illegal and things like that in Canada, and like how governments tried to propose it, and they just weren't educated until like in the 70s. Scientists actually discovered THC and CBD, so then they're able to study it further. But it was just the whole thing, like, this plant drug was bad for you because of the associations with other cultures. I'm just like,
yeah. Well, in the 70s, Nixon in the States got a hard-on for the war against drugs.
Yeah.
And, of course, Canada followed suit right away, and everything got swept up in it. Like, things that are now being proven to be helpful, like marijuana, that are good for people that have medical conditions like glaucoma, or some people that have certain levels of stress and anxiety and stuff like that. It helps them calm down. People that have eating disorders. Endocannabinoids are helpful for cancer patients, apparently, and it actually helps slow down the growth of cancer. You know, and then, well, the same thing with psychedelics. You know, that all got swept up with all that sort of stuff too, and it's like, these guys have never clearly done anything like that then. Like, you don't really get addicted to mushrooms. Like, if you're having a bad day, psychedelics are not something that you do. Like, it amplifies everything that you feel. And, well, I've had a panic attack, like a bad one, on mushrooms once. Don't do it for a couple of years. You kind of get scared of yourself and sort of thing like that. But then you kind of realize that it's like, well, that was stuff I needed to deal with. That's why it came up the way it did. You know, and see a psychologist and deal with some of your things and understand what it is that you're actually doing with your body and your life and your mind, sort of thing like that. And respect the plant for what it is. You know, like anything. Like, you want to get blackout drunk constantly, it's like, well, you're not respecting the alcohol then either. It's no different, but at least that one's legal, right? So it's a weird line to draw.
Yeah, and it wasn't really until, I'm forgetting his name, I think it's like his Taylor in it, in 1997, he got caught and he was charged with possession of marijuana, but he argued it was for medical purposes. And then he took it to the Supreme Court, and they agreed with him that these laws back into like the 1923 up to like 27, and then Canada, like the states, and there was like back and forth. They were trying to like say like there was research to prove that it's not what they were saying. Depends on who was in power, but yeah, he took it to court, and then that kind of started it. Just like it goes against our Charter rights and freedoms. So it really comes down to like know your rights, and just like you have the right to your like freedom of like health and security, and I think there's another part to that. And yeah, from that I just like then they got serious, like, okay, then how do we make this safe, accessible for people, watch the kids, and that's still kind of a problem right now with the dosage right now. But yeah, it just like what's best for people, and I think now people are waking up a little bit better to like plant health and psychological help too.
Yeah, I think that's finally a good thing about it though too, is that for everybody just to say that this is all wrong or this is all bad, it's like, well, they spent what, billions, trillions of dollars in the war on drugs? They're losing, they've lost. So maybe we should follow suit with Portugal, you know, instead of trying to say that everybody's a criminal that has some sort of addiction. Treat them as they are. They're sick. They don't necessarily want to be doing these drugs. They want to be able to live a healthy, happy life, but they also have this chemical dependency that's really hard to kick. And, well, and who gets fingered for the opioid crisis? Opioids were legal, pushed by pharmaceutical companies and large businesses.
And doctors. Backed up by them, yeah.
Right? So, but all of a sudden we're a bunch of criminals again because somebody wanted to make a bunch of money on something.
And guess who's making all the money in the cannabis industry?
Yeah, well, same thing, right? But I mean, all the more reason why, well, all drugs should be legal, really. Yeah. Make it federally controlled. Everything is cleaner, it's safer. You can buy it in a store. You know, if you want places to do it, I mean, there's guaranteed there'll be, you know, safe, healthy places that you can do it. I mean, they started a needle program here in Calgary 20 years ago, I think it was. Like, it was one of the, no, it was here longer than that, I think. So it's like they know people are going to be shooting drugs, and it's kind of the, well, said that on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. It's like, you don't have to push drugs. Drugs push themselves. People love doing drugs. And it's true, like, and it's not because they want to actually even do them necessarily, but there's an addiction component to it. And if there's only criminal charges being dropped on somebody that is trying to be a healthier person, but they don't know how, you know, they were prescribed something like opiates, you know, and the pain or nerve damage that they have isn't going away, so they can't afford the prescriptions anymore, so they find somebody that has heroin or something on the street. It's cheaper, sure, it's probably not clean, and again, you're feeding an addiction and not taking care of the problem. Like, you're treating the symptom, not the actual issue. But at the same time, though, too, it's like, well, where is the Alberta Health Services or federally run services that are, instating these drugs in the first place and making these things legal, and then giving us what? A jail cell because we decide that the pain's too much? Or what, we're just going to not do that? Because there's no other, other intervention courses or anything? I mean, there is, not that I shouldn't say that there is none, because Alberta Health Services has a lot of free, helpful things. But I mean, that's kind of the other part, though, too, is where if you see an addiction in a person, especially when you're a doctor and you originally prescribe these, be aware of what it is that you're giving to these people. Mm-hmm. It's not like doctors are ununderstanding of what's happening. They know what they're doing or what they're giving to people. Some people have a couple of them and they're fine. They don't want the numbing sensation of what's going on. Some people can't help themselves. It's not a weakness. It's an illness. It started as an illness and it's continuing as an illness now. Mm-hmm. It should be looked at that way, not, oh, this person's a criminal today. Yesterday he was totally fine. He was just getting over his pain. Like, well, how did that happen? Mm-hmm. That's a really weird line to draw as well that I don't understand myself.
Yeah, it doesn't really help with like shows like House, where it just like idolizes. That's like, oh, even though like you're brilliant and like you have this pill addiction, it's just like, that's okay, because you're awesome, you're funny, you're getting things done. It's like, no. And I see that too with like alcoholism and like being like a workaholic. It's very tough, and like in corporate setting, like you're obligated in some cultures, like you have to go drink with your boss after hours, not get paid and everything, but like in order to advance your career. And like we learn about this in anthropology, and like that stems too, like typically women stay home with the kids and then men will try to advance their careers with these social settings and liquid courage and like things like that. So it's an interesting, because it's very rooted in culture, and you can't take it away without kind of talking about it and seeing the whole picture. And like people with addiction, they're struggling with trauma, and it's like, okay, how do we help these people? And like even in Canada, we try like get rid of the stigmatism with like mental health, but it's like it's tough to get counseling services, or like you're willing to pay like $200 for an hour, and then that may limit how much. I know in the past it's limited me, but I could imagine even just where you get help after a surgery. And like even my doctor growing up, she just prescribed me whatever antidepressants, and like at that age, like 10, I was like, I didn't need that. I even like looked through my like list, and my mom was really trying to get me on natural stuff as well, and like really more vitamins, and that also stemmed with my diet. But there was still an imbalance in high school and things like that. But really it was just needing help and things like that. And I think at one point I was like over at 300 milligrams on something, and I was like, I did not need that. And I just got off of them like 2 years ago, and I was like, great, my brain finished developing at 25. Like, I have to deal with this. And then my other family doctor, like I told her I got off my ADHD meds and things like that, and I was like, I'm just on CBD and like THC as well. And she was like, oh, that's bad, you should stop. That was it. No discussion, no open dialogue on like how it's like helping my health and things like that. And I was like, okay, that doesn't help. Like you're supposed to be like a medical, unbiased professional, at least in my like idea of a doctor. And here it's all like westernized, or like Western filter. And I was like, that's not fair. You're not listening to my needs. So it's tough when people don't realize that. And like when I was like 10, just whatever doctor is like, I assume you know what's best for me, but at the same time, like that wasn't. And who knows what that kind of long-term effects are for me. So I couldn't imagine painkillers and things like that, and you see people in that cycle. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, that's a tough one too, because I mean it happens to unsuspecting people. And I mean that's the other part too, is where you have some level of chronic pain, where like a back injury or something like that, or nerve damage or something like that from falling, or a vehicle accident or something like that. And these things don't just heal overnight. I mean, spinal injuries, they take frickin' forever, head trauma and stuff like that. There's nothing they can do about it. They can't just wrap it up and expect it to heal like a broken arm or something. And it's not like you can't not use your brain. You can't take a rest that kind of way, sort of thing like that. So, but then people have these migraines and chronic migraines that never go away, and it's significantly worse than just a headache. If you talk to anybody that has had any kind of a migraine, and it's one of those things where, okay, well, now that I've created this addiction sort of thing too, it's like I kind of need to maintain it on some level, because I also have this, like, I tried going without it, and I have this pain pathway that's burrowed into my head now too, and that's all I think of when I sit up certain ways, or I try to move a certain way. Then I just get this throbbing headache, and all it is just consistently pounding non-stop. So it's like I can't focus on anything. Like I'm going like half blind because of the searing pain going through my head, but I can't do anything about it. So it's like I kind of need these pills until my swelling goes down, or the nerve damage goes down. But then, like I say, you're creating neural pathways that are just constantly telling you that you're in pain. It's like, so then you have to go through some level of PTSD training to understand that it's like, okay, well, this isn't actually pain that you're feeling anymore. This is the memory of pain that you're kind of forcing on yourself. And that's kind of the other part too, is where like you can't really expect with socialized medicine like we have in Canada for there to be a ton of understanding with general practitioners on those kind of things. Sure, you're probably going to see specialists after you have, vehicle injuries and stuff like that, but same thing. You're waiting in line, 6 months, a year, 18 months. It's like, well, it's going to take a while to see this specialist. What do I do in the meantime while I'm sitting here throbbing constantly? And it's like, well, you can fill this prescription again. But don't get me wrong. It's not like to say that there's any easy answer for any of that stuff. And I understand that too. And medical professionals, more often than not, are working their asses off to try to make things better for everybody. But they're also limited by certain things, and they're people too. People make mistakes. So maybe that they look at your chart and say, well, this works for 85% of people. Okay, well, I guess I'm within the lucky 15% that can't use these types of drugs even, sort of thing like that, without having other worse problems. And that sort of thing happens constantly too. And I guess that's why they call their jobs practice. So, but yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah, and it's very rewarding though. Like, I think a couple months ago, I had like this older gentleman. He was like in his 80s, and he had one gummy, and it was about 5 milligrams THC, and I think it had some CBD or just THC. And like, he came up and he's like, I had one of these and I was not in pain for the first time in my life in over a decade. And I was like, he's like, give me as much as you can. I was like,
sweet.
Okay. And then like he couldn't really like understand, so then his like son like had to take over, and so I was like explaining to him. So I was like, okay, the better way is like to get on the oil, and then you can do that dose, but I was like, still give you gummies because those work. So a lot of it is now trial and error, because like things will change in the market. And I just get more of a motivator to like kind of help direct, because I see a void in like what we're able to talk in stores and what's on the internet, and like it's still new, and things are like with studies going to get better, same with the product and the growing and things like that. But yeah, just hearing people's stories, like I was addicted, like last year I worked with like a recovering meth addict, and like hearing his story, he's like, I would literally be dead without this plant, and I was like, okay, this is like the real reason why, like I need to fight for this.
Yeah, well, that's just it. I mean, that's why we need to have study and research. I mean, people have been using it for pain relief and stuff like that since forever. I mean, well, I mean that weed documentary that Woody Harrelson did, 20 years ago. Him being obviously an advocate of it for one, but I mean they're talking about how when the Mexicans would come into the United States for labor and stuff like that, and they would bring this plant with them, this weed that they kept dragging across the border or on boats or whatever sort of thing like that. And it's like, well, I don't know, it's not tobacco, but they seem to relax at the end of the day and they get more work done the next day, so good enough. It's like, well, yeah, it's not a problem. But then, of course, true to nature, people in power, it's like, oh, well, if we need to control these Mexicans, can we control the marijuana and then make that illegal and make them deal with the consequences of whatever arbitrary rules we're just going to make up this week? That's exactly what happened. So
yeah, blame another group for a downturn in society. Yeah. Well, Canada has done that.
yeah. I mean, it's a similar story here, right?
Yeah.
So, but I mean, well, even with the natives and sweetgrass and stuff like that, it took them a long time to petition the government and say, it's like, no, we've been doing this for thousands of years. You guys showed up and told us that this thing that doesn't even really get us high, it's part of our ceremonies. It's not anything that you guys need to understand even. It's not hurting anybody. Just let us do our ceremonies. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know about that. It's like, well, of course you don't fucking know. You didn't even try to listen to us.
Mm-hmm. Education, awareness, empathy,
yeah. Yeah, and that's a frustration too, because, I mean, Canada's supposed to be the tolerant, bring in your whatever diverse culture and sort of stuff like that, but it's like, unless you're from here.
Yeah.
It's a mess.
Mm-hmm. Still figuring it out, but I think social media and people sharing their stories will help for sure.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate too, because it is such a fresh wound, and there's new horror stories coming up, right? And that's the terrible thing about it, is that it's like we all want to be able to push past it, but it's like, well, history hasn't fully come up yet though either. Like, we haven't unburied all the horrible things that have happened. So it's like, it's going to take time. There's definitely a lack of trust, and absolutely there's racism. So what do you do though? I mean, there's no simple solution to any of it. You just take the time, have conversations, and hopefully that we can work together to a better future. But I mean, it's not an easy process, and nor is it fast. So, your thoughts?
Well, I think it's good to ask questions. Just conversations. I think people misunderstand, like, having a disagreement or, like, not the same viewpoint as someone will automatically turn into an argument. It's like, well, if you're kind of trying to convince people and, like, kind of convert them, then maybe, you will have some pushback, because no one likes to have things pushed on them, especially if it's your value, and, like, you're going to defend it naturally. But having just these, like, okay, I see your point, do you see my point? Like, there's all sides to the story, and talking to older generations, especially my dad, on certain points, and some of that kind of minded or just environment that they grew up, they may not see other points, but just like, well, this is how it is, like, but it's like, how do we learn from it? Like, how do we get from it? And like, it's like, just adapt. It's like, no. Some people don't have that. And it's like, would you adapt? And then it's like, flip it. It's like, in this situation, if that happened to you, or like this happened to your family, would you feel the same? Like, it's tough in a hypothetical sense, but you just try to get that empathy or that sympathy. Just like, try to see it, like, how their point is.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest one, where, spend a 5-minute session just sitting there and kind of thinking about, like, what would it be like to be one of those people that's been oppressed or had grown up with, everything that they think was supposed to be theirs isn't theirs anymore. And then you're told stories that, well, your history is not really all that important, so you're not even going to learn about it anymore. It's like, there's definitely problems in every community, but for them to be like flattened out and not even really allowed to celebrate certain aspects of their culture, I mean, that's a tough one. And again, it's a fresh wound for the most part. I understand that not anybody that's alive now has really done any of that sort of stuff. That doesn't mean anything's fine. I mean, people are still dealing with Nazi trauma. you know, because somebody comes home from war with all these horrible things that have happened to them or they've done, and they push that onto their kids, and then they don't deal with it well either, so they push it on to, you know, basically us, because it's not that long ago. You know, so that's kind of the other part too. Like, the shit just doesn't go away, and when it's kind of a systematic thing where just because somebody's native or whatever, that they're more likely to get pulled over or stopped on the street to see what's going on, and well, of course they're going to be confrontational. Wasn't doing anything. Why don't you fuck off? Oh, you're trying to get a rise out of me? I'll get a rise out of you, and you know, and all of a sudden somebody's spending an overnight in jail for absolutely no reason, and it's a terrible thing because it's like most people just want to live their lives, you know, and for most of the natives that I've ever known or met or talked to, I mean, they're all genuinely pretty happy people. Good storytellers, love living their lives and stuff like that too, but at the same time though too, it's like you got to get to know them is the other thing. Like, you can't just expect that everybody's going to be nice outwardly though either, sort of thing too, because we all have our walls up for some reason, you know, so it's a healthy, safe thing for a lot of it. But yeah, when you're looked at and judged instantly on what it is that you, because of the way you look or the color of your skin or something like that, it's like, well, that's not fair for anybody. So yeah, and it's a tough one because, I mean, again, no easy answers, right? So
yeah, like a couple of weeks ago I was just walking and there's two women in front of me. I think there's like some people with the carts, but there's a police vehicle and they slowed right down, and the two ladies in front of me, like, were looking at them, and like I think the cop even like backed up, and like I'm looking around, I'm like the only Caucasian, and like I'm like, and the cops are looking at these two women and they're like kind of like just looking at them like not knowing, like they're like, should we put our masks on, like are they gonna like hassle? But I'm just staring at the cops. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, they're not doing, like, no one is doing anything wrong. But I was like, if this is a racial stereotype, I'm like, then I'm gonna be their ally, because I was like, I can't witness this. But like, and then the cops like left or like carried on, but like just seeing the reaction from these two women, I'm like I wanted to apologize, and I'm like, but I was like, that's not the first time probably they experienced that. And I was like, that's not right. And even this morning, I called out the manager, and like I was like, well, I noticed you say certain like description of people, but I was like, I've never heard you say this white person, and I see it all the time too. And I was like, and an argument or this discussion with my sister, she's like, well, it's a description. I'm like, okay, yeah, for a police description, it's very direct. But I was like, but is it necessary for your story to specify, like, oh, that Asian lady? It's like, if it's a lady crossing a street, I'm like, you don't need to clarify that. But it's that mentality. It's like, I've never heard a Caucasian person always say that white person. It's always that, like, other. I was like, that. It's like, if it's not relevant, why do you need to call them out? I see no point to that. And then other people don't say that, like, oh, it's a description. I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't matter. Like, I get you're kind of painting a picture, but I'm like, it's kind of a wrong picture, I think, if it has nothing to do with the story. You're just adding a racial stereotype to it, maybe.
Yeah, unless you're talking about something very specifically that is race-oriented. Like, it doesn't really add anything to the story.
Yeah.
They can just be people.
Exactly. I was like, they're all people. And I even get that, like, with streaming, like, very vulnerable on Twitch, and, like, with that, you can ban people, but just, like, I don't have to say anything. I don't have to explain to you. Like, you may be curious or whatever, and even, like, I get that at the store. It's so much sexual harassment, but it's like, it's none of your goddamn business. Like, and I'm going to call you out. It's like, that's inappropriate. Like, just, but we see now a difference in how the men are treating us, because I'm the oldest female at the store. I have my 22 and 20-year-old coworkers. And that's a lot of guys, like, come in. It's like, oh, where's this, like, description of a girl or whatever? And, like, one customer even, like, offered, out of the blue, nothing related, just like, I'll pay for your butt job. It's just like, are you kidding me? Like, that has nothing to do with your product that you're buying. Like, Yeah, so but now because I have a male manager, he now comes out when he hears certain things, and like I even had a guy like back up and like started to leave. It's like, you wouldn't do that if it was just me. And a lot of these customers are like used to that, and just like now there's a male presence. Now I don't know, now they're being accounted for or something. It's like, and like one of the loss prevention guy, he's like, oh, now they think the guys say that because they know they can get away with it. I'm like, okay, then how we change that? Like, and I think we've had this conversation too. It just like, and a lot of people like even ask me, it's like, oh, do you have a boyfriend? She's like, well, 1, you're assuming I'm interested in you. 2, you're assuming I'm heterosexual. And 3, why are you gonna respect this imaginary person? It's just like, if I say no, it's like, oh, what, now you're gay? Or like, oh, what? It's like, no, I just like, I'm not. Like, I don't need to explain anything to you.
Not like that. It's like, just from those 3 sentences you said, you put up pretty much all the red flags I needed to know that you're a shitty person. So why would I want to be with you?
Yeah.
No, and that's kind of the thing too. Like, well, a similar idea, being accused of cheating or whatever sort of stuff too. And it's like, well, we've had this discussion before. Told the person I was dating, it's like, I'm not into that. You know, and it's like, I'm not looking to chase somebody. And it's like, not only that, it's like, well, this attractive person or this or that sort of thing like that. It's like, whoa. They have nothing to do with the equation, clearly. You don't trust me is the problem. You think I can't handle myself around other people for whatever reason. Well, that's not it. It's like, yes, that's exactly it. That is a problem that you need to deal with, not me. And it's a tough one, because it's like, we're all kind of wanting to just be normal, happy people, I think, for the most part, you know. And it sucks because, I mean, there's a lot of deceit and stuff like that when it comes to relationships, and the whole thing's a mess in the first place. But with that said, though, too, I mean, if you can't trust somebody else that's going to do something, it's like, well, that's a you issue. It's not a me issue. So, like, what are you doing to account, or where is this coming from that you don't trust me? So that's a tough one. And well, yeah, and back to your point sort of thing too, where that whole idea, it's like 3-4 times told the guy that you're not interested, and tries to quantify it for himself to make it feel like he didn't get turned down for whatever reason. It's like, no, you're unfuckable in the first place. It has nothing to do with me or anything else, or my imaginary possible boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. Like, you are a bad person. So work on that first, then go talk to somebody. Like, or at least your approach isn't good, I guess I should say, at minimum, right? So
yeah, like, I think I was telling you a couple weeks ago, I had, like, he's a regular customer, and like, he's not doing much, he's panhandling and things like that, and like, he's bragging to me about like, yeah, like, panhandle for 2 days, and then he can go buy someone to have a fun night. And I was like, okay, that's like, whatever. And then he like led that. He's like, oh, what about you? And I was like, I keep that personal. And then he made assumptions and things like that. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna see where this goes. And I was like, well, you're assuming like I'm, again, hetero. He's like, oh, you're bi, whatever. I was like, well, what if I'm gay? And like, I found out that he was homophobic. And I was like, okay, like, why? And he was like, oh, because, like, I'm at a bar, I'm clearly hitting on women the whole night, and I go to the washroom, and this guy starts hitting on me, and I'm like, I'm uncomfortable, and things like that. And I'm like, okay, so you don't like gay men because they come on to you, and you're not reciprocative, right? He's like, yeah, that's, like, ridiculous. They just, like, hands off. And I was like, oh, so that's how a woman feels. And he was like, what? And I'm like, yeah, you feel uncomfortable because someone's pursuing you. And I was like, that's what you do to women, especially when they're at work, and I have to be nice to you, or, like, nice to you. Like, it was like, just because I can't leave. I'm like, doesn't make it, like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, that's why you don't like. Maybe you should make, like, maybe, like, be more empathetic to women, and when you try to come on to them or something, it's like, are you getting the vibes of that they're interested in you, too?
Yeah, I know that's definitely something I've had to learn, unfortunately, because it's just like, just because you're attracted to somebody, a lot of the time that's a one-way street. It has very little reciprocation a lot of the time. But that's the other part, though, too, is that you're not likely just going to pick somebody up out of the blue. like a cashier at a store, like you say, that has to be professionally nice for one. But the other thing is too is like, well, have you been to the store a dozen times and sat and talked with the person for 10, 20 minutes at a time, sort of thing like that? Okay, then sure, maybe after that dozenth time, ask if the person is single and see if you can actually go somewhere. But yeah, you have a 2-minute interaction, and don't get me wrong, it does happen sometimes.
Yeah, it was like some odd cases.
Right, but at the same token, though, too, I mean, a lot of people are, I think, way too presumptuous, because it's like, well, what are you bringing to the table that makes you think that this person's going to want you? And then you get people to the extremes of that, where these incels start showing up online and stuff like that, and saying that they're owed sex from women. And all these guys that are, whatever, forced to be virgins or sort of thing like that. It's like, well, what are you offering to women that you think that they should be with you? If you have no personality and you're like, what did you expect was going to happen? Like, you got to bring something to the table to get somebody else interested is the other thing too. Like, owed sex. It's like, get a better job and get a prostitute once in a while, I guess, then maybe. Like,
we talk about the culture side of it too.
Yeah. And
seen as property, and can go into another topic of this too, but yeah, it's seen as objects because beginning of time, that's what we're classified as, is just a piece of someone, or but I don't know if you want to go more into that.
I'm fine with it. I'm cool getting into it. Well, yeah, and I mean that was a traditional thing, and I mean some countries it's still that way. I mean, women aren't technically people. It's getting better worldwide, but I mean, even with that said, it was the 20s, basically, before women could vote. So like 100 years ago.
Not even.
Yeah, so that's the thing. Is like, can we really say that we were a country before that?
That's a fair point.
Right? When you don't allow half your citizens to vote or technically be people, even.
That's a good point.
So
or even indigenous,
right. So that's kind of a weird one, sort of think that we're like, oh, we're so progressive. It's like, well, we're doing better than some. We still have a ways to go. So.
Yeah, and in anthropology, like, you can't judge another culture based on your standards of life. And, like, I had this conversation with my dad. He's like, well, they were uneducated. I was like, just because they don't have a degree? No, they're educated in like, many other things. More so than you are, even. And so, it just, like, you can't do comparisons. You have to look at each thing. And even environmental science, one thing, like, one energy source won't be the best for another. You have to go very specific, and you have to go into the culture, you have to go into the history, changes in the environment, climate, everything like that. So it's very complex. It just, there's no such thing in black and white. It's all shades.
Yeah, that's always such a tough one too, because I mean, I think that's the reality of life, is that there's very few things that are black and white. Like, just about everything lives on some level of a spectrum. I mean, well, the whole idea of good and bad is a matter of perception, right? Mm-hmm. So that's always a weird way to see things, but I think we are lucky that we live in an age where the world is becoming a smaller place, and we can be interconnected to other cultures all the way across the world and have a better understanding of people. I mean, honestly, one of my favorite things was Metal, I think it was called. There was a documentary on heavy metal, Headbanger's Guide to the World or whatever. I don't remember what it was called exactly. But this guy from Victoria basically traveled the world, going to metal concerts all over the place and talking to everybody, like how metal was different in Japan, and how there's like 40,000 people that show up to the Wacken Metal Festival in Germany and the Middle East. There's all kinds of people that are religious in their own ways and sort of thing like that. And there's this Hasidic Jew rocking out to his metal and stuff like that. And it's like, that's pretty interesting. And then by the time you get to the end of the documentary, you realize it's just like, we're all exactly the same across the world. You know, it's like the way these guys, even though like a lot of it had to be translated and stuff like that, like just the way they were saying shit, or like you could hear the tone and inflection of the words that they were saying. And it's like, yeah, I know exactly what this guy's saying. You know, and a lot of the time music is a great outlet for raging against the machine, shall we say. You know, I mean, that was the whole reason why that band was popular as well. But it was the same thing with rap taking off in a lot of the Asian world and stuff like that too, where it was basically like a fuck you to the leaders. And I mean, well, they even joked about that sort of thing too with like Russia. And it's like, we cannot stop this. We must control this rap. And it was exactly that kind of thing too. It's like, well, this is it's a force, it's a feeling sort of thing. And it's not just because it's rap or metal or whatever sort of thing like that. It's people tired of things. And they're wanting to push back against the powers that be. And it's like, well, how can we do this? How will people listen to us? It's like, well, let's make a 3-minute catchy song that tells everybody how pissed off we actually are. Everybody starts singing it. All of a sudden, we're on a trend now. More people start seeing it's like, oh, it's okay to sing like this. Sometimes in communism, it's tougher, for sure. But I mean, that's the other part of it too, where you start getting, again, with the global community, and you see these people that are young and just trying to live their lives. And yeah, they're doing it partly to piss people off, especially their older people that are running the country. But it's like, we're also tired of being shit on for no reason. And it's not just us, it's, you know, our whole history of this country that we want to call our home, and we're not allowed to. And now I can't even sing a song about that. Like, what do you think those people are starting to protest and riot in the streets? They just want to go to a metal concert once in a while. Let them bang their head for 2 hours. They'll go home, fall over, have a good night. I mean, and like lots of things. I think that's very important. It's like, if we don't have outlets to get whatever that we've had on ourselves from a work week, oppressive nature, something or another, it's like, well, we all need to vent somehow. You know, and living in Canada, we have it pretty goddamn easy here. But even then, it doesn't mean everything's perfect. I mean, life is easier, but that doesn't necessarily mean people are happier, which is kind of an indicator of what our progress actually is. So
yeah, and I think instead of really having like the spectrum, left, right, whatever, center, with all these, I don't know, it's tough to say it's not against human nature, because I think it is part of human nature. But for me, I wish we just got rid of politic parties and just voted on problems or solutions or like things that we all agree on. Like, everyone should have access to fresh water. Okay, let's make that a mission. Let's not play this, oh, I don't like you, I'm going to ban this, or I'm going to create this law that restricts that. It's just like this is like more than childish. Like, children know better than this. I hope.
Yeah.
Or they do, because they're not exposed to people's biases or business aspects and things like that. But I think it just really comes down to just conversations like, okay, what was the purpose of this? Okay, in this day and age it may have worked, but is this really applicable? And even, I don't know, even being the youngest in the family, I'm like rebellious. I'm like, it doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, I get the rule, but it doesn't make sense. If it doesn't harm anyone, then why do we have it? Like, even...
Well, it's been like that forever.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that doesn't make any more weight for your point. Like,
yeah. Yeah, even like war on drugs. It's like, oh, it's bad. It's like, well, okay, let's ask why people are like drawn to this. Why are they like seeking this? And of course there's like some bad apples who just are bad, like people who just don't care, and adds that stigmatism or something. But
there's also the people like my old neighbor that said, it's like, well, if they legalize weed, I'll probably stop smoking. I mean, that was kind of half the fun. I mean, I had my chair and radio set up in my shed outside, and go in there and feel like a badass sort of thing like that, and hide out for an hour or so like that, and go back inside and watch Netflix or whatever, because my daughter was already in bed or something like that. And, you know, in a way he would go with this sort of thing like that. But it's like, if it's legal, it's like, I don't feel like a badass anymore. I'm allowed to do that. It's like, Yeah, I get it. I mean, I doubt he stopped, but but I mean, there are people that are exactly like that because it was against the grain sort of thing like that. It's like, what, I can go down like basically to 7-Eleven and pick up a pack of joints, just like a pack of cigarettes? It's like, well, this isn't fun anymore. Shit happens all the time.
In this country, go to another country.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing too, like, they had worried about there was going to be some huge drug problem sort of thing like that, and yeah, there was noticeably some problems, and like anything though, this is a newfangled trend or whatever, so it's going to go up for a while, but I mean, within 2 years, everybody calmed down because it's like, well, whatever, I guess, yeah, we can just get weed anytime we want now. And it's like, some people stopped, same thing, like some people that have had some dependency on it because they started smoking when they were 12 or something like that. It's like, cool. This makes it even like less interesting now, and it's like I have more of a reason to stop doing it. So, yeah, it's kind of it's an interesting thing when you know what it is you're getting. You know, when things are regulated, because you know exactly your THC, CBD content. You know that it's coming from a government official or officially approved place, at least, or in theory it is at least anyways. And, you know, people said, like, well, they're not going to spike weed with anything. It's like, well, not with other drugs, that's a waste. But I think it was you actually telling me that people are putting, like, hairspray on it so it glistens better.
Dealers, yeah.
And it's like, holy shit, I never even thought of something like that. It's like, yeah, hairspray's cheap as hell, and you could really make something look nice or whatever, and for cheap.
Or spraying sugar or 7-Up or something. They would spray it on the flour before they harvest it, and then it would still crystallize, so visually you see it's like, oh, there's like more trichomes, it's going to be very potent, and then it also adds the weight. So
you're tipping the scale slightly?
Yeah. But I'm all for the testing, because when I first had it, I trusted my friend from school. This was when I was 15, 14. And so she trusted a dealer. He was kind of sketchy, and I was like, okay, but if you trust him, then okay, I'm going to trust you. And this was kind of after a house party, so I was a little hungover as well. But so not the right life choices in that moment. But yeah, so
really, because I was like fully together at 15. I roll.
Yeah, so we made an apple bong. I still want to actually experience this because I haven't tried it since then. But she didn't tell me how much. And even at that point, I remember how much I took, and that's a good dose for me now. But it was laced. He had laced it with salvia. And I didn't know this until years later, and telling my friend, like, not only was I, like, greening out, or dysphoria, or forget the official name
Disassociation?
of it. Yeah.
But dysphoria is actually probably a good explanation. Sorry. Continue.
Yeah. And so then I also had to deal with the salvia. I saw a cast in the sky. Like, my eyes were like shutters. Like, I felt like I was worried I was going to, like, snap my tongue off and, choke.
Way worse
and
than what weed
like
does,
that. Yeah, and then when I was walking, the ground was, like, going in, and I physically got sick and couldn't eat. My mom, I think, suspected or whatever, but she knew it was, like, I was really dealing with the hardships of it and my life choices at that moment. So I'm all one for testing, but how it is set up in Alberta especially, it makes it very tough because it hikes up the price because the government is now the middle person. So licensed producers in Canada, especially in this province, they sell to AGLC, who governs liquor, gaming, and cannabis too. So it doesn't make sense because they, again, don't have the same regulations and restrictions as alcohol. So then they buy it and then they sell it to the stores. So already the AGLC hikes up the price. So again, it's nice to have that testing of Health Canada and things like that. But as a consumer, it's tough to justify. Do I still go to my dealer? If you have a good relationship, they're clean. It's tough to get onto that. And then these advertising companies and things like that, they're trying to buy everyone out. So they don't. Now we're seeing things drop in price, just with the, like, grow better and, like, the techniques and things are getting a little bit better. But it makes it tough, and that's what's most frustrating for people. It's just like, oh, I can get this. I was like, okay, but try to put a spin. I'm like, try to give it a livable wage in Canada, because it's all a Canadian product.
Yeah.
Find me a job, because now I can educate you, and like, I'm your dealer. But it's still kind of tough, and when the government kind of takes over when they kind of shouldn't, and then you get these CEOs who've never touched a plant but think that they can govern it. It's just like, you don't understand it, you don't understand the culture, you're not respecting it, and where are your customers go back to? So they want to dissolve the gray market, but it's like, you're not understanding it, you're not understanding the needs of your
because you're taking a business approach to it, not understanding of, like you say, not understanding the culture.
Yeah, it's like, you may be successful in like multi-million, billion-dollar like retail setting, but you can't have cannabis as a retail, like, even though it is considered, but it's not. You can't think of it like that.
Yeah, it is still a product that can be boxed up and sold in whatever, it's certain ways and stuff too. But yeah, that's the other thing too. Like, know your customer. Mm-hmm. Like, there isn't the Subway approach to it. You can't really cut corners and make more money out of it. Mm-hmm. You can, I guess, but it's.
And some companies they're microwaving the weed, and like, some people are like telling me that's growing these big facilities, and they're like walking away. It's like, I can't do this to people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like anything. It's going to get the corporate touch to it, and it's going to change it or disaffect it. But that'll be the thing too, is that if it's getting to be less and less good or trustworthy, people will stop buying it from stores, then they'll go back to their dealers. British Columbia has been known for some of the world's best weed for decades. So it's like, if I got a guy that's bringing in however much, sort of thing like that, and it turns back to the black market of marijuana, whatever sort of thing, which, not that it's really ever gone away. But yeah, like you say, know your customer. You're going to shoot yourself in the foot otherwise. So it's a weird one.
Yeah, and I actually was part of a beverage training yesterday, and I had they have a new beer, because there's hops and barley in it, so it gives that nice taste, but they also had a lime flavor to it, and it was actually really good.
Refreshing.
Yeah. Again, the dosage is not, like, for like an experienced consumer, is not hitting that. But again, it's like kind of baby steps. And I explain that it's like, this whole province, we gotta make sure everyone's good with this. No one's gonna like freak out and watch the kids. That's the most important thing. But educate parents. Like, you can't have this lying around. Or I grew up with a guy that would pick locks from his parents just to get into his parents' weed, and I was like, okay, that's kind of tough to kind of stop, but
yeah.
Find a way.
Oh, here we go. Sorry, I got to put my hat on. It's really bright on the sky there. Kind of don't want to put my sunglasses on, because it's like, still want to be able to see each other's eyes. It's dehumanizing. Mm-hmm. But that's just it. That's, again, the whole idea of things being that much more serious when you have some level of addiction to it, sort of thing too, because it's a mind-altering substance. That's the other part of it too, or people that are lobbying and say, oh, weed doesn't do anything. It's like, well, it does though. Like, let's not kid ourselves. It definitely changes who you are. Like, it's not like it doesn't do nothing to you. So that's the other part of it, and to be honest about it, I think, is probably better for everybody anyways, because that's how things get passed properly, is when, if you do the testing and you're honest about the results. You don't try to fudge the facts, because, it's like it's skewing your data. And it's like, no, this is accurate data. It's not giving you exactly the response you wanted, but at the same time, it has its history. People know that it's arguably a good thing with very few drawbacks. So, like, let it happen. Especially when it's digested as opposed to smoked. It has even less chance of being bad for you.
Yeah, and I'm really getting into the science of, like, our body, because we've evolved with it, because we have receptors for it. That's why you can't die from it. You can die from, like, things added to it, or other things like that. But yeah, it's really cool to learn about the receptors. And like, we physically are capable of having this. And like, there are natural cannabinoids in your system. I just learned this a couple weeks ago. It's anandamide. It actually helps regulate your mood it's like the feel good part of it as well, and like a bunch of other things. I was like, sweet. So I just like this plant and external, same with like essential acids. Like we can't like physically make this, we have to take it from plants like rice and beans, or like grains, in order to have our bodies like use it. So just like, here's this plant, like you said, I'm really trying to get even myself, because I was a smoker, because I started at 13 cigarette smoking because of people
because you're such a badass.
well, the guy
Honestly,
I dated for the whole kind of time, he smoked because of his family, and I wasn't really addicted to it until university. Then it came more the habit and like a way to keep myself awake while driving. And so I find myself, I recognize that too. I'm like, okay, am I still addicted to the act of smoking? I try not to have like joints very much. Try and get off combustion, and then use the decarb into my cooking. And I'm trying to get more into that, get more creative, and like the drinks are really nice to it because I was a bartender, so I really enjoyed that aspect to it. But like the flexibility of having a mocktail, and I said earlier too, like it's weird. Alcohol is a weird drug. It's like you're weird for not having it. It's like expected in corporate culture. That's how deals get made. But like for someone like me who has stomach problems, like I can't really drink, and I don't feel good from it either. So, but it's like, how do I still get involved or like feel involved in these social settings? And then that's why I like think these drinks are really good. Plus, no hangover for the most part.
Yeah, well, unless you try to smash back 12, and but that's kind of your own thing. Then it's like, well, anything in excess is going to be bad for you.
Yeah, and you could still get some THC the next morning and things like that, but it all depends on your tolerance. And
well, that's kind of the, like you say with the, hold on.
Still going?
Yeah, I just have to flip the camera around, or the screen around. But the endocannabinoid thing too, like there's, well, when you eat things like pastas and stuff like that, your receptors are open for those. That's part of the reason when, it doesn't matter how hungry you are, that, or how much you've eaten, you can continue to eat pasta, because it's basically like the reward system is constantly being fed, sort of thing like that. And this is like an easy source of quick breakdown glucose for some of it. Like it's basically hitting all the right markers in your body, and you can just sit there and eat a ton of it, and it's awesome. Like it feels great, and it's like, I shouldn't be able to eat this much lasagna. It shouldn't be physically possible.
And plus bread to soup up the
right, so, and that's just it, and it's all those grains and stuff like that we've basically evolved with, and it's like, this is a reward sort of thing like that it's really helpful, because, I mean, as far as we've come, we're still very much animals, so it has this want to get a bunch of easy to store fat kind of food, because you don't know where your next meal's coming from.
Yeah.
I mean, your body thinks that, but your brain knows it's like, well, there's food everywhere. Like
especially in this culture,
Yeah, so it's easy for most of us, especially when we're generations in living here, that you'd think it'd be a little bit easier on their bodies, but that's kind of the other thing too, where it's only been in the last century probably more like the last handful of decades even, where food was not really an issue anymore, and why obesity started becoming a problem again, it started to, I guess I should say, in general, because it was never an issue. It was more so like, are we going to survive this month? Will we have enough food, or have we grown enough rutabagas, or however it worked out, sort of thing like that. So it's definitely a new thing for most of us to try to get used to this thing. And I mean, it's tough to see, especially, the States makes a huge example of it too, where there's simultaneous starvation and obesity problems. It's like, well, how can this happen?
Well, even Calgary, volunteering at the food bank, it's big warehouse like a Costco, and they're like, if we didn't keep getting donations, this would be empty in 2 weeks. And seeing like the volunteers, and like some of them, like that's like they just enjoy, that's a community, and it was just really awesome to see. But I was talking about this yesterday with a coworker. I really wish they would advertise more the benefit of cash donations, because they can buy 5 times more food on a single dollar, opposed to like, it's nice for these grocery stores to have these $5 bundles, but again, they're still making profit off of it. And you take that food to the food bank. Okay, who's going to sort it? Who's going to... And, like, that was my job, or, like, the volunteer's job, is to make sure that there's cans. And on average, if it's... And that's the whole thing with food waste, too, is, like, these best before dates. It's like, well, it's best for the nutrition level, but oftentimes, like, we're taught, like, 3 years after these cans, best before dates, you can still have it.
Yeah.
And so even though I look at my cans, I'm like, oh, okay, even though it's like expired last year, I'm like, I still have time. It's not opened. It's okay. And also being part of vegetarian, I'm like, I don't have to worry about more of that health aspect too. But it was just kind of an interesting system. And like, when I learned that the food bank refused to take money from the government, and it's like, well, why? It's like, but out of principle, they're not supposed to be there. They're doing a service that the government's not doing. And that the government's like, here's money. It's like, you need to do this. Like, you need to touch on that this is an issue. Even in a developed country, there's still so many people struggling. And I couldn't imagine how busy this pandemic has caused, too. Like, even 1 week of groceries to save a family $200 goes a long, long way.
Yeah, absolutely. That's always been the big issue with getting enough food to kids and stuff too, because that's the other part where children are growing. Like their bodies are, not just their brains are developing, but their bodies are growing and stretching, and we are what we eat, quite literally. So it's like you need to have food for children, especially breakfast. And it's been awesome that a handful of schools at least have had breakfast programs for kids that couldn't do it, but I mean, that's also, like a socialized thing that should be, I don't know, better funded by our taxes and stuff like that, because you want to make a better society, then allow kids to have food so they can learn better. Because, I remember going to school where there was kids that were definitely worse off than my family, and we were like lucky when we broke even, sort of thing. So it's not like we were well off or anything. So, but you see these other kids that definitely didn't have breakfast a lot of the time, and they were smaller than all of us. They had a hard time learning. They didn't really give a shit about being there in the first place. Part of that's definitely societal or their own family issues and stuff like that too. So, but that's also kind of, again, part of the problem where education and help and these services that should be allowed to be a bit more. And if we're, as it is, we're pushing towards a socialist society more and more all the time. And why aren't we taking care of people? It's one thing to say that socialism is a good and important thing, but I feel like we're still not even doing the tenets of that, because we're more worried about whatever version of capitalism that we live in. Partly because we're, neighbors to the States and everything's capitalist there. And you can see the issues with that, and it's like we're trying to be different from them, but it's not like we're doing better necessarily.
Yeah.
So it's a tough one. It's easy to point the finger, and it's like, oh, this is wrong. Say, okay, well, what's your solution to it?
Yeah, I think what Paris has done, or just France in general, like banned grocery stores from like throwing out food. I think that should be a crime against humanity.
Yeah.
And because even like in Canada, we waste half the food. And I'm trying to get better personally, like on buying like food saver bags to help my produce last longer, and just meal prep too. Like think up ahead and first in, first out. Like all chefs know that. But I agree, like students should have meal, but even in the States, they find like, okay, you have a meal plan, but like where's the veggies? And like even how you lay it out. Like they found like putting apples and like veggies first, you fill up your plate first, and then you get into maybe the pizzas and stuff like that. That's an easy fill in or something. But yeah, food is fuel, and like it sets you up for your life, and you kind of see to the development, and
Yeah, well, that's actually what I thought was kind of interesting on that Human World Within documentary that's on Netflix right now. And they were talking about exactly that food is fuel. And, even getting down to the point where most of the food you eat isn't even what you shit out, necessarily. I mean, definitely if you eat more than what your body can consume and hold on to. But I mean, for the most part, your food is broken down to the molecular level and makes your whole body run. Like all those micronutrients and minerals and the actual sugars and food proteins and stuff like that to help your body run. And then, yeah, like there's a very little bit of it that's put back into or stays in your digestive tract or whatever. But most of it, what you shit out is actually like dead blood cells. It's part of the reason why our shit is brown. Quite you. But I mean, it's the carbon and stuff like that our cells produce, and certain level of dead cells and stuff like that, like other than just blood and stuff like that, plus a little bit of the food waste. But it's like it's most of what we have in what we consume is what it makes our body, what builds our bodies. And I mean, that's again all the more reason to have healthy, decent food available for people. And it's a tough one because I mean there are so many things. Like I had apple pie and coffee for breakfast today. So it's not like I'm immune to it. I understand that certain things that are partly addictions, because for me, I found too that with me eating healthy and clean a lot of the time and having like straight up chocolate, like baker's chocolate with no sugars and just the cocoa in brick form, basically, it's good. I enjoy it. Like, it takes a bit of getting used to, sort of thing like that, but I'm eating it because it is sugar free. It's everything free. It's just the cocoa, or cacao if you want to say it with a French accent incorrectly, but but it's also something that it's like I still can't get away from, because like my gut bacteria that's there to break down sugars, every once in a while saying, hey, we're dying off, you need to feed us more of this, sort of thing like that. And there's 100 million neurons that run throughout our body, talking to the 100 billion neurons in our brains. Like, and most of those neurons are in our guts, and it's maybe not a direct line or system, sort of thing like that, but it's like you're craving these things, you should have more of this. Like this type of bacteria is dying off, but it's like if I get past that craving, I don't actually crave sugars at all. But it's like hot summer day, it's like, well, let's have an ice cream. I don't just would never eat ice cream, but it's like, come on, okay, fine. All of a sudden it's there again, right? Because there's something that needs to be fed and taken care of, so your body has to break it down somehow. And I mean, well, Kurzgesagt, in a nutshell, does a good job on doing a quick, 5 to 10 minute video on the microbiome and how your body basically produces mostly 3 types of bacteria for digestion, and one of it is basically for junk foods like sugars and that kind of stuff like that. There's other ones for proteins and the other ones for vegetables for the most part, but it's like when you eat a lot of junk food, you want more junk food because there's that much more of that type of bacteria that's there, but that's ready to break it down. And when you eat a salad or something like that, it doesn't feel filling because it's not even digesting properly. And you notice it when you have a shit because you're shitting out leafy greens still. You can see them in the bowl. It's not really digested. But same thing is that if it's something that's simply adding to your diet or reducing certain other things, it's just a matter of forcing yourself into that way of eating. And it is that. It's not, I'm not going to pretend like it's easy. It is forcing yourself to do the healthier thing, but vegetables are cheaper than a lot of junk food a lot of the time anyway. If you know how to cook, at least, anyways. So. Yeah, it's very frustrating going to like a fast food and seeing like healthy options are more expensive, and they're like, oh well, it's veggies. They take like a lot to grow. I'm like, what about the food and the cow it takes to grow it? Like, you're using my food or like vegetarian food to grow animal food to grow animals that is then food. I'm like, then why is this more? Yeah, then it kind of goes to politics and business agreements in the states with. But it's easy to quantify or easy to do the math on that one sort of thing too, because it's I think they did it on water consumption or something like that. It takes for every 100 liters of water, you only produce like 4 pounds of meat protein, and you produce 50 or 60 pounds of plant protein, something like that. It's more than 10 times as much though. And again, if you know how to cook, knowing that, you know, beans and lentils and all kinds of other things are packed with proteins and amino acids and stuff that are absolutely there to feed your body on the right things, then it's like, well, yeah, what are we doing then? We should have more vegetables in our diet.
And the alternatives have gotten a lot better. I haven't tried the Very Good Food Company yet. I have stocks in them, but I believe what they're doing. And as a vegetarian, it took me a while. It's like, well, I gave up this. Well, why am I going to eat simulated, like, chicken strips or something? I'm like,
yeah.
But now that I kind of get, it's like, oh, I'm not having, like, some days I don't have creativity, or, like, I just want to be included. Like, the fire I was at over the weekend, it just, like, yeah, it's nice to, like, be part of it with the veggie burger. Like, it's still, like, same toppings and things like that. Except there was no lettuce as an option. And, like, one guy is like, I need the green. So I was like, oh, good, someone finally said it. Just like, okay.
Yeah, get rid of the bun and just wrap it in lettuce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, like, to me, it's weird. I have to have 4 types of colors in every meal. Like, I was making rice and I had beans, and I was like, okay, what else? Like, what is the color? Like, I didn't have corn, like, frozen corn. I didn't have canned corn. I was like, and I had, like, a sweet potato. I was like, okay, type it into the search engine, and I was like, what meals can I make from this? And I was like, oh, this is simple. I can have it on its own or whatever. But, like, for me, like, I have to have 4 colors. That's just what my body craves. And yeah, just like for me, like smoothies is my addiction in the morning. Like I enjoy it. For me, it's easy on my stomach because I don't physically want to eat something. But I was like, smoothie, I can down, and then my parrot gets a thing. It's our morning routine.
That's awesome.
And then like add veggie protein to it. I can add like a meal replacement to it to make myself feel full. But yeah, you just kind of get creative. I was a very plain eater, but at the same time, I was like, I gotta venture out certain tastes and textures.
Yeah, I can't. It's actually been several years since I've had fish and chips, and even from that, it's just like I don't want to eat this. Like if there's an actual green salad or something on the side, then I might consider doing it. But like even if the fish is done well, it's just chances are it's going to be battered heavy, and that's deep fried, or even if it's pan fried, like it's still a bunch of bread and a little bit of fish, and and the fries. I mean, they're sure the whole thing can taste good, but it's like I also know that it just sits there in my guts for hours, and I don't feel good. You know, so there's nothing there to get things moving to actually digest properly. So, and I'm very similar. It's like I like to have typically 3 or 4 food groups in every meal if I can, because it's a little bit of everything for every portion of it. But it's like, again, it's the colors and stuff that are, thank you. It's the colors that are also important, sort of thing too. But I mean, I've also noticed that if I'm eating meats, it digests better. I feel better if I have fruit or vegetables with it. You know, if I have a big bowl of yogurt or something, it's like it's nice to have granola or something in it, with probably, even if it's dried fruit, like it's something that it helps me feel more full then. You know, so there's more to it that has more staying power. And I mean, honestly, yogurt parfaits, well, go skiing, and guys always make fun of me if I don't bring one. It's just like, well, where's your yogurt bowl, man? Like, what the hell? But it's true. I mean, going skiing, like, it takes a decent amount of energy when you're out on the hill for 6-8 hours or something like that. And I have a bowl of that, and I'm good for the day. You know, it's pretty amazing how well it sits. But I mean, that's kind of the thing, because I have the high-fat yogurt, I have the, you know, not overly sugared or heavily honeyed granola or anything like that, and then whatever frozen blueberries that are pretty much thawed by the time I eat them. And you know, it's like it's well-rounded. It's got a little bit of everything that I need, and yeah, and I don't have to worry about packing meat around with me or anything like that, because I mean, somebody usually brings jerky or something anyway, so I'll have a piece of that. But it's not like it's a necessity. You know, like it's that meal by itself has got a lot of rib sticking kind of food energy to it. So Yeah.
I just can't help though, like, shake my head as like white bread bun or just white bread, and then like processed meat or something, like salami or something. And I'm like, or like mayo. I'm like, sure, it'll fill you up, but I'm like, what's the nutrient level on that?
Yeah, well, and if you're diabetic, you can't eat like that. Which I thought was kind of interesting too.
Yeah.
Like having family members or people that I've worked with, and they said it's like I can eat that sandwich, but it's like I have to take at least one of the pieces of bread off. Because we'll go to somewhere like Cowtown Beef Shack, and the place is fucking awesome for slow cooked meats. But he's like, if I can just have it without the bread, then no problem. My body can digest it. But it's like there's not enough fiber in the whole thing for it to negate the amount of sugar I'm going to eat in the white bread. It's like, oh, it's like, do they have whole grain at least? So it's a little, there's more fiber, so it actually helps. Because I think they said that for every gram of fiber, you can take away 10 grams of sugar or something like that. Something close to that, anyways. So, but he's like, at the same time, it's like, it's not like you can just eat a bunch of sugary stuff like that and hopefully eat enough fiber to counteract it. Like it still messes with your body. But I was like, yeah, if you want to just have a meat and vegetable kind of thing in a dish, they'll make that for you. I was like, oh, okay, perfect. And the more I think about it, it's like, yeah, actually I've been enjoying reducing the amount of grains that I've had in my body, because it's grains and other starchy foods like potatoes or rice or whatever, they're good and they help, again, with some level of rib sticking kind of parts of the meal. But unless it's winter, I kind of don't need that. And it also adds to inflammation. So it's like, yeah, it's kind of when you feel bloated and a little bit gross and stuff like that, especially if you have, 2 pounds of lasagna or something in a meal. But it's also something that, be aware of what it is that you're eating. If you're going to eat a bunch of lasagna, like at minimum, go for a walk after. Like let it get going and do some level of digestion, because it's a lot of food energy that if you're just going to let it sit there, it doesn't do anything, and that's how you pack on the weight. That's the other thing too. So
yeah, especially if you sit down for a show for 2 hours or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, even in Canada, they're saying, like, you should eat seasonal, like, especially in the winter, we should eat more root vegetables, because that's what we're able to grow, and, like, think about, like, 100 years ago, like, before, like, import, like, it's amazing, like, I don't know, just maybe privilege, like, open the fridge, like, there's nothing to eat, it's like, there's tons of stuff to eat, just, like, gotta figure out what you're craving or whatever, but, yeah, especially in the winter, it's just, like, how privileged we are that I can still get blueberries every day of the year.
Yeah.
And it's like price quality or whatever, like it's a couple bucks more, then it's like, then you just don't deserve to eat it at that point. Or
buy them frozen, because they don't lose that many nutrients.
Yeah, so just like learning kind of like knowing, like kind of like even now in the summer, I'm like, I really eat 2 meals a day, like, and I bought like a bread, like a whole loaf, and I was like, I had to freeze half, because like I'm not gonna get through this. Like I could have like, I don't know. I think I didn't get through my eggs enough or something. So I was like, I could have had like French toast. I was like, but I like light meals in the morning, or like have a smoothie bowl, which was I just discovered a couple weeks ago. I was like, this is the best thing. I can add granola to it. I was like, okay, cool. I love my smoothies. I can just add more to it. But I think with the internet, it's helped. Like, cause even my family, she's like, oh, go on Pinterest or something. I'm like I can go search, but I was like, I want to be creative on my own. Like, I think I can create a meal that I can, one, survive, be happy with. But
yeah, well, especially when it comes to something like a smoothie. I mean, there is a lot that you can add to it. I mean, you have, well, you already have something that's pre-cooked, like a sweet potato. It's like, what would work well with sweet potato in a smoothie context? You start looking through the fridge, and it's like, well, got mangoes. I mean, I'm kind of going in the same color direction, but it's like, there's nothing wrong with that. It will sweeten it up nicely, and, I have hemp hearts, I have almond milk. It's like, yeah, let's see where this goes.
Though my blender was messing up, or I have the bad problem of, like, overfilling my smoothie thing, so I have, like, a little bullet thing, or Cuisinart, and so I bought, like, a mixture, and it had chickpeas in it. But there's a couple mornings where I didn't blend it as well, and like I had my like metal straw, and like bits of like chickpea were going off. I'm like, it's not what I wanted to taste. I was like, I love chewing on like almonds or something, but I was like, maybe I won't put chickpeas in my smoothie. I'm okay with like a spinach and things like that, but I was like, okay, maybe not. It's too savory for me.
Yeah, no kidding, right? It's yeah, there's certain things that kind of don't sit well for breakfast. I mean, gotta get used to it. I know. Well, I actually went for dim sum on Sunday, which had been, I don't know, decades, I think, since I've gone to dim sum last time. And yeah, like I know people. Well, my mom, she's like, no, I can't do fish for breakfast. It just doesn't make sense. Like, oh, really? That's the problem? So I have no problem eating like all these little pot stickers and dumplings and all these wonderful little dishes or anything like that. And they just keep showing up and say, hey, you want some of this? You want some of that? Try some of these things. Like, it was just awesome. And everybody's like starting to like lean back and do the, boo, okay, we gotta stop. So yeah, that's probably a good idea because I don't feel full yet. So if everybody else is feeling full, it's probably a good time that we all leave.
Give yourself 20 minutes or so, yeah. Let the brain absorb it.
Yeah, and that's the other part of it too, where it's like, cool, am I saving for an ultra marathon or something? No, I'm probably good enough with the food that I have, whether or not I'm actually full or not. And
I'm the worst for that. I have to like measure my pasta in a bowl, and I'm like, remember, it doubles. I'm like, I may feel this hungry, but I'm like, for me, like, I like fresh pasta, so I'm like, it doesn't make sense. Yeah, I do want maybe for lunch the next day, but I'm like, I don't. For me, it would be more wasteful to cook 3 meals of pasta. I'm like, no, just cook the 2, or like have a leftover and then recook it or something. Because then the 3rd day or something, I'm like, it's not as fresh, so I'm not going to enjoy it as much. So I'm like, it's more like knowing yourself too. It's like, okay, am I really going to eat this, or like, is my eyes wanting to eat this? It's like, no, I got it. And for me too, like with my stomach problems, I'm like, I chew off more than I can handle or something too. So
yeah, very true.
Yeah, learning to have stop, but people do like struggle with that. That's why they have the surgeries to shrink your stomach or put that band on it so you physically don't feel hungry.
No, you have to. Almost always, you have to change your diet and exercise more. Because I don't remember. There was something I saw about it, and the stats were just like surprisingly overwhelming. Where people that have like stomach stapling or lipo or whatever sort of thing like that, within 5 years they've gained as much, if not more, weight back. So it's like, well, that sounds terrible. You spend a bunch of money on trying to get thin and you haven't done anything. So it's like, you probably could have spent that however many thousands of dollars on a personal trainer and you'd be significantly better off instead of, well, I mean, it is, I get it, it's tough. Because, I mean, there's definitely, again, it's a mind change that needs to happen just as much as anything. But, I mean, you watch infomercials and stuff like that sort of thing, too, where it's like, oh, you're fat? Don't worry, you don't have to get up. Just take this pill and it'll melt the fat off of you. It's like, well, is that really the best way to go, guys? We all know it's not, but it's like, this isn't illegal necessarily either, so we can sell this product to get people to do things. Or not have to do things, but, lose weight anyways.
Well, these companies create the problem, then they sell the solution.
Yeah, that's kind of the other part too. And again, I understand that not everybody is, well, fortunate as me, where I'm capable of just getting up and going and doing however much exercise I want to do. So to a degree, I kind of understand, even if it's somebody with an altruistic idea of what it is they're trying to do, it still doesn't change the fact that we all have some level of mobility capability of doing something, right? Even if you're bound to your couch sort of thing like that because of some sort of health condition. It's like, well, you still have to be able to go to the bathroom somehow, right? So if that's straight up on a catheter or something like that, and every time you move, you're in some other pain, then okay, maybe that doesn't really apply to you so much, but if you can move at all, that means you can exercise. So there is some level of doing it, and it's always tough, and I kind of find it difficult because it's, well, being that I'm technically a personal trainer, I guess now, that I'm trying to motivate other people to do things, and it's like, part of the reason why I'm doing it is because I'm using it as a motivation for myself. Yeah. Just as much as anything. So it does have some level of selfishness to it. So that's part of why I'm doing it, is like I enjoy being able to get other people fit and feeling healthy, or well, getting them healthy, I should say, because being fit and being healthy are two different things. But just having some level of consistent exercise where somebody's, there in their corner, encouraging them positively to say, yeah, I can sit here and say, don't do this, don't do that, blah, blah, blah. But it's easier to instead of put a negative spin on everything, say it's like, hey, let's do an exercise. Hey, let's go for a hike. Hey, let's do a bike ride, sort of thing. It's better if it's not the same thing all the time. You get to mix it up. You get to find more enjoyable things out of it, because just going to the gym and pumping weights gets boring. It's tough doing anything, even training martial arts and stuff. It has its ups and downs. I mean, I've pretty much fully enjoyed it the whole time myself, but I know not everybody's like that. And even for me, I mean, it took me a long time to get used to motivating myself to get off the couch, because it's easy to make excuses. Really easy to just like, well, I don't know if I have enough money for gas today. Yeah, that's a good enough excuse. It's never been true. But
I think you said that in your first podcast with like Master Piercy, like it's like, well, I don't feel like doing this, and like I saw this too, like as an instructor at the studio at that time, like it's interesting, like one student would go through that effort and like have worked all day, you go to the studio, you change, but you're tired or you're sore, and like some people would just give up. It's like, oh, I can't do it. But it's like, but you made all this effort to come here. You're changed. It's just like, we can still work with your injuries and like, but it's just your mental power. And it's tough. And like over, 8 months ago when I had to force myself. And it was kind of like, I don't want to get more into it because it's kind of a fun secret. But I had to force myself. At that time, I lived in a building that had the gym. I didn't take advantage nearly as much at the work gym. So I had 2 gyms available to me. But I didn't really use it at that time or whatever. But yeah, so that 8 months, I was like feeling really crappy. And I literally rolled out of bed, got my gym stuff. I'm like, I don't care how tired you are. You're going to the gym. You'll wake up. Like, half an hour in, and it's usually even in Taekwondo, Kung Fu, with the first 15 minutes were the toughest for me. But I would like look at the clock, I'm like, okay, 5 minutes has passed, 5 minutes, like, and you'll be okay. Then the endorphins will get in, and then you'll start enjoying it. But it was just that motivation, that discipline. It's just like, you feel crappy, I don't care. Like, you will feel good after this. And that's really been what's been consistent. And being accountable for me was being accountable to my Instagram story. Yeah. And then people like started getting motivated and motivated me. So I was like, it's this nice little motivation circle. Yeah. Even last night, I didn't want to do anything, but I was like, well, my back is sore. Okay, I should take this time. And even though at some points in yoga, I was kind of falling asleep, and I was like, yeah, I could have gone to bed at 10, but I was like, no, I needed to do my half an hour exercise. Yeah. And then it just also maybe the stubbornness is just I can't miss a day. Even I've been doing this for so long, it's just okay, now I can't stop. People are relying on, people comment, and for me it's also a fun avenue, coming up with fun things. And
but similar idea, you're not doing exactly the same workout every day either. You're making sure that you're showing that it's no, I did a walk with my dad and we're all over the city basically walking downtown. Mm-hmm. And it's walking 10K or whatever, that's definitely a workout. So
yeah, and it to be flexible with myself too, even though I wasn't drenching in sweat, that still counts. Mm-hmm. And it just it counts because I would have been doing nothing, or it'd been okay to do nothing. But it's no, the purpose is we tell kids to be active for 30 minutes a day. It's okay, as an adult I should be able to do this no matter what it looks like. And that was really the sum of it. It's doesn't matter. It's it's a beautiful day. Okay, then let's go for a walk. Now, my usual walk pass, I'm I can go more. I want to go more. Yeah. And that's really encouraging for me, too. Just it doesn't, I don't have to limit myself. And even though it's even though I don't feel it's good or something, it's okay, then I don't have to do as much as I did yesterday, but you still do something. Still work on something. And it really comes down to that healthy lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah, and I found the self-talk was a big thing. I actually watched there's a BBC documentary, I think, on kind of exercise or anything like that, but it was also about neuroscience, basically, on how it helps people do better for themselves constantly, and the idea of the self-talk, and we talk to ourselves something like 300 to 1,000 words a minute. Self-talk, like just our voice in our head, sort of thing like that, how we're whatever sort of thing, like not several voices in our heads. But that idea that we're always having some sort of thing to say, like, this is too hard, or I'm too tired, or I don't want to do this sort of thing. If you can catch yourself just to change those into, I'm already here, I just need to get through this, whatever the first 20 minutes is. It's usually the hard part anyways. You know, just get into it. Like, this is going to feel great by the end, sort of thing like that. And that's what it is. Like, you never regret the workout you did. You always regret the one you didn't do. So it was just a matter of, for myself, getting kind of, I was lucky to be able to see that one, and it's like, yeah, like, that doesn't just apply to this. That's kind of like everyday life sort of thing, where why am I thinking negatively about this, or, you know, getting angry about somebody in traffic or something like that? It's like, I don't know them, I don't know their situation. Maybe they've been a perfect driver for the last 10 years and this is the first time they screwed up, and I just happen to be the person they were in front of, right? So that's a way better way of looking at it, instead of just being pissed off at everything all the time, or getting down on myself about certain things, because life's not that hard. It really isn't. I mean, being a large, able-bodied white man living in Canada, it's easy for me to say that. So, yeah. So that I mean, I kind of have to say that as part of it, but at the same token, though, too, it's just a matter of, again, it's a matter of perspective, right? You can make life as tough as you want it to be, and if everything's dragging you down, or you look at it with frustration and anger and everything gives you anxiety, it's like, well, it's tough to get through a lot of that then. Yeah, I understand. But it's just that small reframing of the way you say certain things, and just, okay, I can say the same thing, just slightly more positive, slightly more encouraging to myself, and then the more I do this for myself, then other people see what I'm doing, and like you said, become inspired, because it's like all of a sudden now you're 3/4 of a year in, or more even, and it's like, yeah, I gotta make it minimum 365, and even then it's just like there's no end point to this.
No, and that's like even the thing. I'm like, I'm not even counting up to anything. It's a journey.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm constantly growing, and then now it's like, okay, like I can prove to myself this for this long, and then now I'm even like, I think I saw a video of like this woman like bench pressing like another woman, and I'm like, that is amazing. Like, and that one of my goals though too, and it's like my goal in life is like to have all these random skills that really complement. Like, I really want to know another language. I'm like, it doesn't make sense, like country that's bilingual, but I don't even know our second language much. But then it's like traveling too. It's like Europe, 3 languages, just because that's your culture. But one of them was be able to lift up my own weight. Who knows? So maybe like camping, hiking, whatever.
Just like curling in one arm, you mean, or?
Well, I always wanted to like be able to lift myself up, and for me, like with a server injury, like even like just discovering knuckle push-ups and kung fu, like going from taekwondo to knuckle and kung fu, I'm like, okay, like yes, I'm training my conditioning my knuckles, but it's also better for my injury. And even that little switch made it in push-ups more enjoyable. And like some people are like, oh, you're doing push-ups on your knuckle? I'm like, yeah, it's easier for me.
Yeah, I'm a real toughie.
Yeah, it's real flex. But also for me, like kung fu was really amazing, just like with the mentality, and like I really enjoyed the spirituality of it. But as a woman too, like the confidence in like wrist escapes, and I try to teach everyone I know, like it's very empowering, like just simple movements. And Master Coral was amazing at it too, like using your voice. And I try to teach my coworkers too with the sexual harassment. Yeah, you have to be kind of professional at the same time, but if someone's not being professional to you and really like not respecting you, and you drew that line, and for me, I'm like, you get one warning. Of course, on the street, if someone comes up behind me, you get no warning because I get no warning. And there's no rules, and yeah, you may expect people to treat a certain way, but at the same time, like, you can't really rely on that. And it's kind of frustrating in movies. Of course, it's a movie and things are scripted and things like that. But like, as a martial artist, like, if you just did that, it wouldn't have happened like that. But at the same time, that's not really life. And
no, but it's similar to movies, though. It's like, if you have training, no, you're not always going to be perfect often. I mean, there's no training for sucker punch, but you have something in your back pocket with your understanding of your own body, of your own confidence. You know, like, well, I was talking to Miss Den yesterday. I had podcasted with her, and she said that too, where she's been fortunate because she's been training her vast majority of her life, like since she was 8, I think, and she's been comfortable the entire time. Not because she hasn't been in tough situations sometimes, or, you know, put her out in herself in a vulnerable space where, you know, she's drunker than she probably should be, and, you know, dressed really skimpy and high heels and sort of thing like that, and kind of stumbling around. But she's like, at no point have I ever felt like I haven't been confident about taking care of myself, or even somebody that I was with, because, you know, they're out for a girls' night sort of thing like that, and I believe her. I'm pretty sure she could take care of, you know, a couple of people by herself if she needed to. Yeah, it'd be a little sloppier if she was drunk, but that was the other thing that I always found that was interesting with any kind of physical fitness, is that you're more aware of your own body. And it doesn't have to be martial arts necessarily. Like, it's just a matter that you're spending more time being alone a lot of the time, because there's more often than not, if you want to be some level of fitness, you're not going to have people around. And even if you do, I mean, you're still checking into your own breath if you're hiking up a mountain with friends or anything like that, or where's my water level, you know, have I drank enough today? You know, you're always constantly checking in with yourself. Why are my feet getting sore? Did I wear the right shoes? Or, you know, am I walking poorly? Is that why my knees and back are sore? Yeah. So maybe the shoes and actually the way I'm walking maybe needs to change a little bit. So then you're constantly checking in with yourself and say, okay, now that I'm more aware of my body, I can also take care of it in other ways, where even if you have training or not, it's like, well, you have understanding of yourself, of your capabilities and stuff like that. Yes, obviously training is going to be better for everybody. In my opinion, I think everybody should have some level of martial arts or some level of self-defense. But I mean, that's been a huge thing for me, is the getting to know myself better and in positive ways. I think it's been a huge help. And, you know, getting, like you said, getting that discipline. You know, it's just like, it doesn't matter if I feel like doing this. It's not what's important. I need to do this. So yeah, it's so much more rewarding when you feel confident and capable. You know, and working with people over the years, doing whatever level of personal training, seeing them being more and more confident in themselves, and you know, starting to have better posture just because they're psychologically more confident in themselves, so they roll their shoulders back. They understand that I feel better about myself. I can put my vulnerable spot out, my open chest out to the world, instead of arms crossed and kind of hunched in. And it's amazing how much our bodies and stuff tell our story to everybody else. You know, and if you can be that much better for yourself, you're better for everybody else around you as well. So it's, yeah, I mean, one hand washes the other kind of thing, right? So,
yeah, it's been very fortunate. Like, I feel like my life hasn't really begun until like 2 years ago. There was a point when I was 18, I had to deal with a really big loss. Still kind of dealing with that, just because it's a really basic human need for it. But living on my own for the past year and a half, again, having that stubbornness, it's like, I can do it. Like, it was tough losing the corporate job and like having my income like get cut in half. But still being able to learn, it's like, okay, I can still fend for myself. Fortunate that I've been cooking for myself for 12 years now, and I was having my own groceries at home. And there's that joke, and I posted it a while ago. It's like, tell me you have a younger sibling without telling me you have a younger sibling. It's like you write your name or you hide your food. And I was like, yeah, I had to write my name on my food, like, because I bought my food because I had special like diet or whatever, and like I treat myself or things like that. So I even like had to like write my name on my special ice cream treats because that was like what would help me get through it. And I had a huge fight with my sister when she ate mine, and it was like, it was a principle thing, like I can't have anything nice like in a family. But when you're living on your own, like I'm the maid, I'm the chef, I'm like I have to get the food. Like if I don't cook, it's like, yeah, I could get food like takeout, but it's like, but that's still like my income that's going towards that, or I have food that I can.
Or when you walk out of the house and you come back and like everything's exactly the way you left it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess not. Yeah, having a roommate or anything, it's moved out. I got Ollie, my bird, to blame on things, but speaking of which, I put him in my room so he has some exercise time. But
nice. Yeah,
it just that's another thing too, having like kind of a dependent. So it's like it's not an excuse, but I gotta go let my bird out. But so it was a learning experience, like dealing with myself, especially during a pandemic. It just like, how do I motivate myself? How am I accountable for it? And luckily, people in my life that I can send a message to. It's just like I'm struggling, and then have that help. But it's more the systems, the routine. It's just like, no, you were doing this because it's good. Like, you know it's good. It's tough, but that's life too. It's what's the alternative. It's like, if I don't do this, then it's this. It's like, well, I don't want that, so I'm going to have to do this. And that's the same with Kung Fu. It's like, even though, like, even Master Conor, it's just, like, messed up or something, it's just, like, it's good for us. It's like, yeah, give it your all, or else you're doing 50 more. Yeah. And then you'll be good. Or you are, like, the side kicks, like, after, 10, your, like, hip flexors kick in, because you're not really use that. Even in Taekwondo, I learned that too. It's just like, you are physically not using this every day. So if you want to get better at your skill, you have to do it. And even in high school, I remember our bio teachers like, yeah, your body is physically ripping the muscle. So, and just like, it's kind of bad for you, but like your body builds it stronger. So it's actually beneficial. But just like, you have to go through that tear to build it up. And one guy was like, well, that's why I don't work out. It's not good for me. I was like,
you didn't hear anything he just said, right?
It's all mindset, and just like that's same. It's like you go through trouble, you go through hardship, but you learn, you get growth out of it. Yeah.
Well, that's why I kind of generalize that point sort of thing. It's you learn more from the mistakes or from your hardships.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. Like it can be no great triumph without any great struggle, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And even small struggles, like you say, it's like, it's tough to work out every day. And it's like, but at this point, it's like whatever level of exercise that's happening, it's something I can look back at, and you're in, 200 and some days now, of just this level of consistent workout. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, this is a journey. And I mean, one of the things that one of the guys said at the studio, about Kung Fu, and I think this applies to, fitness in general, is that it's a marathon that you're not racing against anybody else, and there's no finish line. And it's like, well, finish line, I guess, is death. It's one way to look at it, but I mean, that's the thing. I would rather stay active and die early, even, because I'm pushing myself too hard, maybe, and die in my 60s. Healthy and active, instead of being 80 and spending the last 10 years in a bed, or hobbling around, sort of thing like that. Sure, maybe I'll tumble down a mountain and have a horrific death, but it's like, hey, I was climbing a mountain. Hell yeah, I was in my 60s. Mm-hmm. Right? So, it's going to be a journey no matter what, and that's why somebody posted that sort of thing too. Like, it's tough being fit, but it's tough being obese as well. Like, they're both tough, but like, which one do you want to choose to be your version of tough? Like, well, yeah, I can see, I mean, there's tons of people that you work with or family members or something like that that are struggling with certain levels of whatever, exercise, food, addictions, whatever sort of thing like that. And it's like, well, do I want to be that type of person necessarily? It's like, if I can't motivate them to do it, it's like, hopefully I can just do my own thing and then lead by example, if nothing else, where they can see that I'm doing well, you know, and it doesn't take that much work to be like this. I mean, same thing, like you have a handful of friends that you want to spend time with, going for bike rides, going for hikes, going for a swim or something like that, whatever sort of thing like that. And it's not big things, it's just something where you can spend time and chat and enjoy the conversation, so that you don't even realize that you're doing exercise sort of thing like that, because you're engaging at the same time too. And that's what makes it all that much more fun. I mean, Netflix is always going to be there, right? So like, don't worry about that. It'll you can turn it on at any time, you know. But like earn it though. Like, put yourself out there, get something done, and then say, okay, well, I can, you know, have a cheat meal, whatever sort of thing like that, or whatever. I mean, today I kind of felt like I almost earned the pie that I had, because like, well, I went to the gym first thing before I ate anything, and I spent a solid hour there, well, a little more than an hour, and then I went and walked around the grocery store, and you know, like inside of a grocery store you walk a mile or so or something like that in there, and it was good. Like, okay, it's like I'm having a later breakfast at 10:30 or something like that, but it's like I deserve this meal now. Yeah, I could have eaten healthier, but at the same token though too, it's like, well, now I've done this, I had it early enough in the day where I can still burn these sugars and stuff off, and it's probably going to make me feel like I want to crash later, but it's like, okay, that's the other thing. I know that this is likely going to happen later. Mm-hmm. Be aware of it, you know. And I think that's actually been a big thing again with the whole fitness and self-awareness sort of thing like that too, is that mood spikes happen along with food or blood sugar spikes. So it's like, well, if I'm feeling really happy and good, it's just like, is this because of something, or is it because I ate something that's helping me boost this? Or if I'm feeling dragging and feeling tired, it's like, no, I slept well, I'm feeling hydrated. It's like, no, it's because I had, you know, whatever, pancakes and syrup or something for breakfast one day, and it's like, yeah, now I'm dragging acid halfway through the afternoon. So that's the other part of it. But
yeah, the fasting was new to me, and well, during the pandemic and when I lost my job, I wasn't working for a month, and I kind of let the wrong input in about like, yeah, we should stay home, but I was like, but I can still go for a walk, like no one around me, I'm not gonna like, yeah, but I chose not to, and it was just kind of the habit. It was like, it didn't make sense. I was like, well, okay, like use this as a vacation or whatever, not really, but ended up like drinking quite heavily, like, again, not have pop ever, but in that time I let myself, and I was like, had money, I had shouldn't be spending. But yeah, with that bad habit, just slipped, I gained over 12 pounds or so, about 15 or so, in just that short period of time. And then that made me feel more sluggish, and then just the whole mentality, like couldn't fit into some of my clothes. And then getting back into work, getting back to that routine, like it was tough standing for a whole shift. And I was like, I'm not used to this. Like I was a server, like busting by, like I was just, very athletic, and just like I was not doing anything. And then it's like, okay, get to know the body rhythm. It's like you don't have to eat right when you get up. And so that was kind of my thing. It's like I would roll out, put workout wear, run, like go down on the stairs, go to the gym, and then I'd be hungry because I didn't eat. It's like, this is what you're doing first thing. You are working out. Yeah, you're going to be hungry. Your stomach's going to be growling in half an hour in the workout. But it's like, you're going to finish this. Yeah. And then it was a nice reward, cooking, and then it tasted better, too. It's just, like, sweet. So that was a long process of it, and I still try to get back to it. Just, like, and I enjoyed that even last night. I was like, I would love to do, like, yoga at night, and then it kind of calms me down, be to a meditative kind of state. But yeah, it's like whatever works for you, but just like you gotta have that discipline at some points. And yeah, I've been fortunate for that, being, I don't know, where my strong-headedness and strong discipline in my diet, and it was like, I get not everyone can do it. I'm not going to force that because everyone thinks differently. So it's like where you are at, but you have to like, and I kind of like call people out on it. It's like you have to be honest with yourself too, or else you're not going to be acceptable and not accountable for other people too. So it's like, again, if you want help, you have to work for it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, well, and the other thing is too, is to not be afraid to ask for any kind of help, really.
Yeah.
I mean, don't be dependent on people, or fully dependent on them, but it's like having the right people in your life that just, I mean, again, it's just as much as that it's accountability for them just as much as it is for you, and we're doing this together, sort of thing like that, and make excuses to do things instead of make excuses to not do things. And that was my thing for fitness kind of thing in general, where like I said earlier, it's like, well, video games or Netflix will always be there. I can turn this on at any time. It's like, it's not going away, but it's like right now I've been sitting here for 4 hours already doing nothing. Sure, it's Sunday, whatever sort of thing like that, but even when it was, minus 30 outside, it's like, well, at minimum, go for something of a walk. I mean, grew up in Canada. It's not like I'm unfamiliar with the weather. I have clothes for it.
Yeah.
You get out and get a little bit of exercise, and it's like, it's all that much better because it's cold, so your body's working that much harder to keep you warm and stuff like that. And then you get back to your house, and it's like, okay, now I feel like I've done something. Like I shoveled the walk while I was at it, or did a lap around the storm pond by my place and stuff like that. It's a couple miles worth of walking, but it's like you get out there and you start getting your blood flowing, and the sun's shining, or even if it's cloudy, it doesn't really matter. It feels good. And it's like, okay, well, there's a bench. I'm going to do a couple quick push-ups. What the hell? I mean, they're inclined. It's even easier to do, so why not? And it's like, there's another bench. I better do some more push-ups. And it gets to be that kind of that point where, again, with repetition and discipline, and it's like, well, most people don't want to do anything. I mean, it's kind of against living things nature. It's like the whole idea is to collect calories, not burn them off for seemingly no reason. I'm not in danger. I'm not in really any need to, but it's like, no, we're smarter than that. Don't just fall victim to your supposed biological needs and stuff, sort of thing like that. Like, arguably, we're the smartest things on the planet, so go gain some of that programming. Do intentional fasting. Like, food hasn't been readily available for forever, so try it out once in a while. And the whole intermittent fasting thing, okay, you can call it that. You can just call it skipping breakfast, whatever.
Well, it was like, for me, it was like not eat until like 11, and then don't eat past 7.
Yeah.
Because I usually like a bad habit of like eating right before bed, and I'd still be hungry in the morning. But it's like, okay, but you gotta understand your body, you gotta understand the biological, and just kind of manage towards that. What's best for you. Some people's bodies don't do good. For me, like I need carbs. Like I just, even while vegetarian, I don't have much natural fat in my diet anyways, until it's like dairy or like junk food.
Yeah, well, vegetables are loaded with carbs anyways.
Yeah.
Which is kind of nice.
Yeah. But just for how active I am, it just I need to manage that. Even like working out, it's like my grocery bill increased by $25, so I was like, okay. But
totally worth it though, right?
It is. It's totally worth it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I never really liked reality shows. I'm like, why am I watching someone else's life? I never got Big Brother, and people like would talk about it even at work. I'm like, I'd have to leave. I'm like, I don't care about this. I don't care what this person said. I'm like, I don't care about their life. I have my own life I'm living. And that's really kind of stemmed even like last year. I just like that kind of switch, or even 2 years ago. Just like I lost over 2 years of my life just because I was on autopilot. I wasn't dealing with my grief. I was quite a bit of substance abuse just with cannabis, and then I was like, okay, I need to draw that line between medical and recreational. Even now, I'm recreational like seller, but I'm medical user. So I was like, I gotta make sure I'm aware of this. But it's really just, I want to live life, and at times I don't want to. Like, yeah, I get down or whatever, but for me, it's just like hijacking your brain with your natural hormones. And for me, it's just like working out or getting sun, having like laughs with people. Yeah. So just gotta motivate yourself.
Yeah, and actually to speak more to the grief thing too, I mean, that's such a mess. I mean, when you have, well, because, I mean, they always say that there's, whatever, the 5 stages of grief. And it's like, it's not a straight line. And you go back and forth between all of those stages for, like, years. And it's not like it ever goes away. You just learn to deal with it better, is all. So, and it's tough, because it's not like anything that you can, well, it's not like any other feeling. Right? And it gets you at the weirdest times, and it's frustrating sometimes because it's like, I don't have time to deal with this right now, but it's like, well, it's because you haven't been dealing with it, so whatever sort of thing is triggering it is part of it, and it's like, you need to deal with this, you know. And it's, the nice thing is too, is again, luckily living in Canada, that we have grief counselors, and, you know, hopefully you have decent friends that you can talk to about certain things like that sort of thing too, because I mean, grief is a tough one. I mean, I lost my dad in 2013, and it honestly didn't even hit me until months later. Like, I didn't believe he was gone. Like, I was going to call the farm, and he was going to be there. Like, he's my dad, of course he's going to be there, you know. And it finally hit me one day when I was driving, and I looked up at my my windshield, and it was like, however many kilometers to your next oil change, and I was pretty much there. And then I looked over, and it's like, the last time I got an oil change, my dad was sitting beside me, and I lost it. I had to pull over. I didn't know what to do, and it's like, it finally hit me, like, he's gone. And it's like, oh, okay. And then every once in a while, when I think about I need an oil change, it's just like, oh, okay, hold on. And like, I'm tearing up now. I mean, it's not, it's weird, because it's like, yeah, it doesn't go away, right? I miss my dad all the time, but it's like, I also know that he was well loved, he loved us, and he lived the life that he wanted to, and I got to be happy about that, because, I mean, he wasn't a great man, but he was happy and he was good to us, and I think that's all anybody really needs, you know. So I think it's good to, again, focus on the positivity. I mean, yeah, it sucks he's gone, but I mean, that's not the only thing that he was. You know, he had 61 years of life, and I got to see 30 of it. You know, I clearly don't remember the first 5 or so, or 4 at least, anyways. But I mean, yeah, that's, again, it's like, it's a life that was comfortable and happy, and I'm glad to be a part of it. I'm glad he was around for us, you know. But at the same time, I mean, he was kind of overweight, and it's like, well, I love my dad, but it's like, I don't necessarily want to look like him, because he was over 350, I think, even when he passed away. So, and it's, I mean, not shitting on his memory or anything, but at the same time, though, too, I mean, I'm grateful to have that kind of comparison, to say that it's like, well, if I can take care of certain things now, then maybe I won't have some of the necessity of some of the pills that he had to take and stuff like that. And I mean, a little bit of fitness goes a long way, you know. Like, something, what is it, 20 minutes of activity 3 times a week or something, like, knocks down the 4 major killers by like 60% or something. Like, okay, well, yeah, I can do at least 20 minutes worth of exercise 3 times a week. That's no problem, right? So why not?
Yeah, my sister told me grief is love with no place to go.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah. I was like, I love this person so much, they're not here. And it does suck when you don't have a funeral, and like, that's something that hasn't even brought up in my family, with my grandma passing last year.
Oh.
Like, well, like the pandemic, like, we haven't been able to drive out to Manitoba to, like, I think her ashes were sent there, and then I think the person like buried her. We just haven't had a life ceremony.
Oh, that's brutal.
But we're gonna have to deal with that, because we haven't really had to deal with it. Like, besides my mom and my sister, we were the only ones able to go to the hospital to say goodbye to her, and like, luckily my sister recorded her last words, so we have that. But, like, I made sure I saw her every Sunday. I'm like, or tried to at least. And, like, I missed that one before the shutdown. And I was like, I should have. But, like, I was worried because I was taking transit and things like that. But, yeah, not having a life ceremony and, like, that final goodbye is really, like, unfortunate. But it's those memories and, like, certain, like, for me, like, certain country music or an activator. And I was like, I can't. I'm not tearing out just the sun. But, yeah, it's very tough, and, like, I have to prepare myself, like, before every June, because it's the anniversary of the disappearance, and so I was just like, hey, how am I going to deal with this? And one of the things I've done is my tattoos. They're a daily reminder, and whether or not, like, my dad's like, why don't you just get jewelry or a piece or whatever? I was just like, because you lose that, and it's not the same. Like, for me, like, you have to physically go through the pain, and you have to deal with the healing, and that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy tattoos and piercings, is the healing process, because it's physically there, whereas mentally, you're like, yeah, you struggle with the frustration, and, like, deal with the activations and things like that, and driving home on Saturday night, it was, like, 1 a.m., and luckily, the deer didn't go right, it went left, and I know you're not supposed to do this, but I swerved to get out of the way, so it just worked out. But, like, the whole kind of drive, I was shaking, and I was like, saw my life behind my eyes, and I was like, for my eyes, I was like, one most thing though I think really came to my mind is, like, I didn't do a will yet, and, like, I've had a class where she did a motivation or an inspirational talk, and it was about how in your 20s you should have a will. You don't think about it, but it makes things complicated if you don't, and there's a lot of cases where the government takes things, but I just like that healing. It's just like, for me, what am I going to leave behind? And of course, like, yeah, losing someone, just like you see what they leave behind, and it's very positive. Some cases there's some negatives to it with debt and things like that, but it just, yeah, it makes life precious. And just like, okay, what do I want to get out of it? What do I hope to pass on or not pass on? Yeah, it's a funny emotion.
Yeah, and I think that's also a nice part about it too, is it gives you an appreciation for life. Mm-hmm. Is that when you have the chance to grieve and reflect on the good parts of their life, and go through the whole process of being okay and having laugh with friends about things that you did, and then all crying together, and then having another laugh about some of the shit that you all did together. And you know, it's good, because I mean, you need to process that stuff. I mean, anything big like that, any loss or any version of trauma, I mean, you can't bottle it up. It has to be it has to be dealt with. So, and I mean, there's countless cases of people not dealing with things or feelings and stuff like that, and getting autoimmune issues from them. So, I mean, it's...
Yeah, I almost got an ulcer because I held the stress in my stomach, and I still have to watch and heal it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, right? So it's tough, you know, but it's even tougher to not deal with it. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, yeah. I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, don't get me wrong, if you need to talk to somebody about it outside of a podcast, let me know. I have a pretty good idea, somewhat of an idea what it's like. I mean, your friend, or I don't actually even know, it was a family member that disappeared?
It was my first love.
Right. Yeah, I think you did tell me that, actually. Yeah. I feel like an asshole now, sorry. But, I mean, it's something that, I mean, yeah, at any time you need somebody else to talk to because it's bothering you or whatever, then let me know. But, I mean, I get it. It's shit. It's terrible to try to figure out what to do.
It was really 4 years of counseling, and I was fortunate in Cochrane. There's a walk-in clinic, and like I think it was like my fourth counselor. Like, you got to match up with the right person and feel comfortable with it. And it's unfortunate in Calgary there's a temporary or like a short-term counseling, but for me, like it's tough to start over and to carry on with that. And some people like weren't the best at dealing with it, but the one I had, he really kind of saved my life, or helped give me the tools to help save my life and things like that. And first few years, it was just bawling my eyes out. I was like, why did this happen? And then made me appreciative because it's just like it was weird being older than someone that you didn't expect, and having gone through, that was really the first kind of like death that I had to kind of more so deal with, and then other like throughout like a few years after, going to funerals of like men under the age of 35, and it just really hit me, like seeing older people. I just like realizing like everyone's like walk of life is different. Anything could be along the lines. Like even my volleyball coach, he took his life and he was 35.
Oh jeez.
And he leaves behind 2 kids. And like at his funeral, like it was tough because it was in a religious church and they don't agree with that. And so that was tough because also he was cremated. But it was still like, and my teacher, like his best friend, and he was also my coach at one point, but he was also a religion teacher. But I recorded the speech, and he said just like it should be like depression and like suicidal should be considered like cancer. Like it's an illness. We need to have like people who are trained for this to recognize that like it's just like you're feeling sad, get over it. Like that's so incredibly insensitive and very wrong. And I'm sure maybe people who say that are dealing with it too, and maybe that's how they're raised and they're just voicing it. But yeah, so like having life happen, and then a friend who I saw at the funeral, she apologized for being a bully for me a little bit in high school, and then I didn't realize that was the last time, and that was her way of saying goodbye to me. And then 2 weeks, she took her life. And I didn't know about it until months later. So I was like, I missed her funeral. And it's very tough to reach out to that family. I try to reach out to people I graduated and things like that. I saw some of my friends at my teacher's funeral and things like that. But yeah, it just not knowing like for help, and like for me, with my counselor, like he just like heard me out, cried or whatever. And then when I got home, my mom's like, why is your eyes red? Assuming I was high or something. I was like, I'm using it to deal with this. Like it was a way for me to kind of get through everyday life. I was kind of a crutch at some points and it was out of control, but like I wasn't really hurting anyone. Like I still was going to school. I was just like numbing a lot of the things just to get by. And through that struggle, but it was just really that hope and that support, because trained professional and like how the mind works and things like that. And even a friend, like she's like, I can't really deal with things. I was like, for me, like picture you're a safe place, and for me it was a meadow and a tree, and she's like, put all what you don't want to deal with in a box and bury it, and then you can come back to it. But just like you may need to clear that mental space and be like, it's okay that like this is a problem, but I will deal with it when I'm ready to. Like, because if it's hovering over you and things like that, I think that can be quite dangerous for some people. And for me, I had to deal with that. Like, that was like with my dad. Just I didn't have a relationship with him, but I was like, I can't deal with that right now. I need to deal with this. Yeah. And then I soon got appreciation of life. It just like, I can't keep numbing it out. I think that's disrespectful for the people who knowingly took their life, or accidents happen and then no say in it. Even like on the weekend, it's like, that could have been it for me. And then it just like, okay, how can I make it easier for people too? And like, that was something that I had to think about when I was suicidal as well. Like, my mom knew. I booked a hotel in Sylvan Lake. Didn't plan to come back. I didn't know exactly how I was going to do it. I had multiple, like, ways of doing it. Yeah. But at the same time, I just, like, I didn't want to do that to my mom. And it just the aftermath, too. It's like, if a person takes their life, it's about 6 people that they're hurting. On
at
average.
Least, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's tough in the first place. I mean, just going against your programming. I mean, self-preservation is like right there in our. And I was
worried that it would fail, and like I would have to deal with a life like injury or something. Like had I taken the decision to drive into a pole or something, and it's like, well, why just like wreck the? Like it's like my mom wouldn't get the value from the car that she bought me. I was like, but at the same time, would she want to deal with that? All these things that can go into the whole thing. But yeah, and I know some people that their friends survived with it, and just like, I'm glad you did, because now it's a beautiful story. It's a hard story, but beautiful for someone else who's struggling with it. And that's kind of like the hope of it. And then think years later or something, I came across the Book of Life, and I just love that movie. It has every good feel for it, and like love story, it has like the comedy, and then I was like, yes, so that's my story.
Oh, nice.
Still being written. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I just like remembering the dead, and I love the culture, the Mesoamerican culture of it. And that's kind of really kind of stemmed from little bits of that.
Yeah, that's actually really cool too, because I think that's a big important part where, yeah, like the Mexican culture in particular, I mean, they have Cinco de Mayo for honoring the dead and stuff like that.
Dios de Muertos. Cinco de Mayo is the war.
Or, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Day of the Dead. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So, but I mean, that's the thing, that we're constantly trying to run from aging and death and stuff like that in a lot of, I don't know, industrialized countries or whatever you want to call us, but it's a natural process. I mean, we just talked about food for an hour, basically, and, you know, like, there are certain things that are dying for our preservation, you know, plant or animal. And that's the other part, too, is that we die. It's the natural part of life. I mean, that's part of what makes our lives precious, is that they end. So to have a reminder of things for you in particular written on your body, I mean, that's a beautiful way of taking care of it, you know. And yeah, and having that traumatic event sort of thing like that, having nowhere to really go or deal with it sort of thing, I mean, that I understand. Like, it's a mess, and it's really tough to deal with things that you've never done, first of all, you know. And to lose somebody, like, it was weird, actually. I lost my grandpa when I was 14, my dad's dad, and we all cried our eyes out for that one. And then when my dad passed away and we had him cremated, we spread his ashes on the farm, I didn't cry. And I felt really bad about that, because it's like, is there something wrong with me? Like, I was, to a point, I was starting to feel like I was trying to force it even. It's just like, I should be crying. Like, this is a sad situation, sort of thing like that. But then it's like, well, I'm not the person I was when I was 14. Grandpa's different than Dad. You know, the situation was a different sort of thing, was where my grandpa had been suffering for a long time, and it was almost kind of like a nice release at that point, sort of thing. And I mean, similar for my dad, but my dad suffered even less, I think. Like, he was in the hospital for like a week before he passed away. I mean, he'd been in and out for certain things, and it was just kind of quick and over, sort of thing like that. And I mean, partly because it's like, we had him cremated, and my grandpa was an open casket, and I saw his corpse, which I don't recommend for anybody. It's a weird one. It's a Catholic thing. I'm not really sure why they do that.
I think, I remember my Uncle Pete when I was 7 or so, and you don't really get the concept of death until you're 8, is what my sister was saying, psychologically.
Yeah.
I think that was knowing that, because my teacher's daughter just turned 8, and I was like, okay, that's what she's going to realize. But then seeing like the spinning image and his son, I was like, oh my gosh. But yeah, you can't, again, like you're saying, like grief stages and things like that, but sometimes you're just like, oh, I think I'm okay with this, but I shouldn't be okay with this. I should be more sad, but it's like at the same time, I kind of was prepared, or... Yeah.
Well, and I think I heard a good way to think of it too is the PTER, not PTSD, post-traumatic event response. I mean, and the way I heard of this one, it was explained really well, because the idea that post-traumatic event as opposed to post-traumatic stress, I mean, yes, something traumatic is going to be stressful, obviously. So instead of having it redundant, they have an event, and this one wasn't anything that you had control of, right? So it's something that is definitely a part of your life, and it's something that you'll kind of come back and forth from this event. And to call it a response as opposed to a disorder is to also understand that this isn't a weakness. This isn't something that you have control of even necessarily, because it's like, it's something that's happened that I can't really do anything with. Even when I do deal with it, it's like I kind of feel better with it, sort of thing like that. But it's like it hits my guts with a pang of stress and anxiety that I don't know what to do with sometimes. And sometimes I have the time where I think about this person and how I enjoy them and stuff like that. And it's a good feeling sometimes, but it's like you still have that aching and loss sort of thing like that. So the PTER thing, I think, is a better way to kind of put some understanding on what grief is, and for it to be understood and to be okay. The other thing is that we need to have some level of processing and working through it, so we can get to a point where it's constantly thought of more of as a celebration of that person's life, not a fear of my life ending or what happened to them or whatever. And the other thing is, it's in the past. You honor the person as they were, sort of thing like that, but it's nothing that can be changed. It's something that's ended, and you just have to accept that that's a part of life, is that it does end. And it's obviously always easier said than done. But I mean, that's kind of at least a part of a way to kind of look at it, and to say that it's a PTER sort of thing. Like it's got its own nice acronym, feeling Peter right now, sort of thing like that, or whatever sort of thing like that. So it kind of gives it a different feel to what PTSD even feels like at that point, sort of thing. And to be okay with the fact that it's not a disorder, right? It's a very common thing. We're all going to feel that, probably, unless you're a sociopath or something. You're going to feel empathy and loss, right? So it's a tough one.
Yeah, especially if there's like no answers for it, and like that's just a very strong desire, and like recognizing this, like, I'm feeling this because I'm missing this, or my needs are not being met.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of it too. And like for me, I have an unhealthy reaction of anger. Even as a young kid, I just get angry. I just need to punch something, and that's really what helped me heal, was getting into Taekwondo. Just like, I have all this energy. Like, I can cry it out, I can talk it out, but I'm like, I still have this physical need to get it out. And that was a very healthy way. Like, I gotta kick something, I gotta learn I got built strength, and then it just stemmed from it. And then I want to learn more and, like, kind of deal with the demons within and, like, kind of go from it. And that's when I found, like, Kung Fu. I just, like, I really enjoy the Buddhist philosophy and, like, kind of, like, the meditation and yin-yang, like, learn your energy and the forces with it and everything, and then the physical aspect too, and then built the confidence through self-defense and all of it. So it really combined, like, everything I was kind of searching for. And then through that, it was like a phoenix. You're like, you burn yourself and you then rise in the ashes into something that you're like, okay, I can deal with this. I may be activated from thoughts or events, or for me it's just like days of the calendar, but it's like, I can get through it.
Yeah, and that's definitely a good way to look at it. I mean, it's tough, Yeah, and you sit and think about it, or meditate through it, or whatever it is, sort of thing like that sometimes, and it sticks with you. But I don't know, like anything though too. I mean, and we were talking about this yesterday about the whole idea of crisis and opportunity. I mean, in Chinese, it's the same thing. The word for it is the same thing. So as this, I can again look at this with negativity, and it's like, this is an issue, or it's going to put me into a depression spiral, sort of thing like that, or is this an opportunity for me to learn about myself and appreciate the life that I do have, and be thankful for things, or be grateful, sort of thing too. And it's again, it's tough. It takes practice, like anything. But I mean, that's, again, I like looking at it the best I can, is like, this is an opportunity to learn. So I mean, we do what we can. Yeah.
I hope through, like, even after, like, everything kind of getting open up, and I don't ever like saying back to normal, because I don't think it ever will be, But I think people are hoping for that. A lot of people are like back in the offices, and they're happy to because they didn't really have the best home life or an escape or whatever. But I think we need to talk about it. Like, can't just ignore what happened this past year and a half. Like, to each individual person on unique
What do you mean,
levels.
Stampede? Let's just go party.
Yeah. It's really good for a while, but then just like can't run from it. Can't run from it.
No, and I think this will be interesting actually because of pandemic hitting the world and stresses and things and tensions have mounted for so long, and we'll see if there's going to be another lockdown because it's Canada. It's quite possible.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, yeah, I think that'd be the other thing too, where hopefully counselors and stuff like that are going to become busier. There's going to be a larger need for them because we all have just gone through something that is not normal. You know, and regardless of consequences or the actual story or who gives a shit or anything like that, the fact is we just spent a year inside. You know, we had a decent enough summer last year sort of thing, but even then it's like it wasn't without people getting into trouble and warnings and laws, and even now, like, we don't need to wear masks. You go to the store with, you know, a 70% of vaccination apparently, and 70% of people are still wearing masks. So it's that it's that triggering part sort of thing too, where it's like, well, do I walk around without a mask now? Is like, should I just still wear it out of comfort and safety, or should I not worry about it too much? I mean, me personally, I don't. As soon as I had to stop wearing a mask, I was totally into it. But I mean, I also understand that for other people's comfort, if they need to wear a mask or just staying away from people when I go to the grocery store or whatever, you know, I still would respect people's boundaries in the first place. But I mean, if I'm standing beside a pair of elderly people, I'll just in general just stay further away from them just so that they feel more comfortable. Because society has changed without question. And how we deal with it, hopefully peacefully together, there's going to be some level of growth from this too. And, well, again, a sense of gratitude and appreciation for something that was taken away from all of us.
And two, like, I think everyone, like, agrees that, like, first responders and, like, I think I saw, like, nurses are getting a cut. It's just like, that's how you give thanks to them for working hard their whole lives and, like, helping people? It's like, that's not fair.
Yeah, but it's not a surprise, though, either.
Yeah.
Frustratingly, but
I think that's when people, like, need to speak up. It's just like, hey, what are we really valuing? Like, entertainment? And, like, even, like, I think we talked about this on Twitch. It's like, yeah, you're not really doing much, but you're making millions of dollars. Yeah, here's this. It's a weird system. But through this, I also really learned about consent, too. Like, you're talking about the mask. I still have my mask at work. And today, like, I gauge it on people when they come in, and some of them are not sure. They're like, oh, should I be wearing a mask? I'm like, no, I'm just dealing with a lot of people every day. And, like, I just, at my, comfort level, but also, like, maybe some security out of it. Like, I just still sometimes wear it, just out of their comfort level. But I had one person comment, he's like, oh, I'm sure glad I got my second dose or anything, because, like, I wasn't wearing my mask because my first customer wouldn't wear a mask, and just, like, I want to be more personable. But it's like, I get it. Like, I get your kind of concern and things like that, but for a long time when you're told to wear this and it's like all of a sudden now it's okay, people are like, is it? Is it okay? Like, is it? Like, am I okay? Like, am I okay? I don't know if I'm okay. And then it's like, I don't know if you're okay either. Like, I don't know if I'm okay, but just for other reasons too. So just that trust, but it's also, the conversations and, like, being open to it first.
Yeah, well, because we've been put into this level of fear for a year straight, and then it's kind of just in our bones now, sort of thing like that too. It's just like, are we okay? Are you okay? Am I okay? Is everything okay? And it's like, it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, even though I really enjoy, like, I miss wearing lipstick, I get clear skin, but it's just like, okay, that shouldn't be the real kind of importance of this, but...
Yeah. I miss being able to not worry about if I had spinach in my teeth. Because you just slap your mask on, and it's like, nobody's going to see you anyway.
Yeah, getting to know people, seeing people's faces, and like, I still really wanted to wear my mask too, because like, I think the first day or something, like, I had a customer like ask me to pull down my mask, and I had to deal with this too on a walk, and it was like, I'm putting this boundary in line, especially like, like, friendship, not interested in you or whatever, like, and then, just like, I took it as like, take off your shirt kind of thing. It's like, why am I going to take off my mask? Like, I get, like, it's weird not seeing people's face, and we've dealt with it for over a year, but just, like, I felt that was inappropriate. So I was like, no, just for that, it's going higher. Like, my whole eyes, no.
Tell me what to do.
And that's more the stubborn thing. It's just like, but it was just, like, kind of at that creepy, just like, is that the girl? I was like, I was hoping to see your coworker or something. I'm like, that's weird. I'm uncomfortable. Please leave. Like, that's not called for.
Yeah. Yeah, for realsies.
But, it's interesting. I think vitamin D also has helped, I think, too. In any culture, there's more sun. People are generally more lively.
Yeah, I mean, other than just, brain health and stuff like that, too, it's been general health. It helps for lots of stuff. And again, harping on fitness, people that were obese were more likely to catch it in the first place. And I don't know, I should probably figure a nicer way to say that for, positivity of exercise sort of thing. But, I mean, there's a lot that we all learned about ourselves, which was, part of it. And I mean, again, of course, the world got divided for another reason, because, vaccines are bullshit, everybody needs a vaccines don't work, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, whatever. I mean, this is the direction the world's going, and some people are not anti-vax and talking bad about this sort of thing. So, and now we're passing laws that say you can't even talk about it. So it's like, well, kind of getting messy all over the place with this now too, right? So it's a weird thing. I mean, and it's not like that everywhere. It's kind of just mostly here in Canada. So it's an interesting thing. I mean, again, I think it'll be interesting to see more so what the economy does, because I don't think we've seen the worst of it. I think it's trying to crawl back out of this. Like, I'm hoping by 2025, like, the world feels like it's normal again. But I have a feeling it's still going to be some time. So.
Well, I haven't even totally looked into what happened in like 1920 and things like that, or their pandemic a little bit earlier too. So it was like in the roaring 20s, everyone's like fancy and just like, okay, we get it now. Is that going to be less? But at the same time, I deal with a lot of environmental anxiety, like learning what I learned. Even when I was diving a few years ago, like the coral was bleached, and that was the second biggest like coral reef in Honduras, shared with Belize. And then a few years ago, like Australia's barrier reef was declared dead. So I just like, but seeing all the images of like Italy, the fish coming back, and like Venice, and then clear skies in China, I just like, okay, so we can slow down our emissions and our production. It does hurt economy because we've snowballed this effect and like capitalism and things like that. It's like, okay, what if we like kind of scale it back? Maybe try to do a circular economy so we're not wasting as much, and like we have the resources. More businesses maybe be able to jump in on this, especially the ones like Coca-Cola and Pepsi, who've actually started this. They're big contributors to this plastic pollution. They should be the ones that clean it up. But it just opportunities of crisis and opportunity.
I want you to keep going. I really need to use the bathroom.
Oh, I do too, but I'm gonna get up. Is there one over?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. I know Master Piercy was able to talk about himself, and I watched it too, so I was like, oh, I hope he doesn't do this to me, but life is full of joys. I don't know where you're at, but hopefully there's some hope. Good conversations. I find YouTube really blew up. I know for myself, I use like workouts and things like that. So you get creative, inspire. I even came across a lot of people who's like, oh, that's so many people are doing this. It's like, well, there's a lot of people in the world, but they also don't have your touch to it. So I think I always kind of go with that aspect for it. I'm just rambling on the world situation.
All right, sorry about that. Yes, there's a very large storm drain over there if you want to use it. Yeah. But other than that, we are 2 hours and 50 minutes in. So if you want to shut it down for the day and reconvene another day and find yourself a bathroom really quick.
Also, I don't know if you want to do a different part of the stream of workouts.
Sure we could.
Yeah, what time would be 8? Okay.
So we are, yes.
Any other topic? What was the quote of the day again? I don't know if we worked into that.
Zeitgeist.
What was the definition again?
Oh, the spirit of the time.
Spirit of the time.
So I guess actually, being that we're talking about the pandemic, the zeitgeist kind of currently is fear.
Fear of the unknown. Fear that we're all going through this and we don't have the answers. Even some of the leaders or so-called leaders of places may have not done the best of that they could have done, but at the same time knew for this century to go through it.
Yeah, the whole thing of the masks. I mean, the social distancing. I mean, just being afraid of each other.
So unnatural.
Feels weird. You know, some level of touching and compassion and stuff like that. Even from, well, you'd even talked about how, like your mom doesn't want to come visit you because you didn't get a vaccine or whatever, or at that time, at least, anyways. And it's like, well, you're not even going to give me a hug? Like, this feels very unnatural now. And I mean, that kind of just amplified all over the place. I mean, not saying that just walking around giving people hugs randomly is necessarily wanted in the first place either, but I mean, yeah, even our friends and family that we typically share some sort of physical contact with, we're not allowed to have anymore. It's very isolating, and you feel like a criminal, partly because, I mean, some of it was considered criminal activity for, you know, breaking boundaries and stuff like that, or congregating into two larger groups. You know, like we couldn't even be more than one person per vehicle, or well, however many people from the same household in the vehicle. You know, if they were handing out fines for that even, because two kids were from different houses and they were going to school together or something.
Or arrest for playing hockey outside.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, I understand a lot of those charges and fines and stuff were dropped, but I mean, it's hardly the point. Because they hit the news and then they help instill fear and stuff like that with people and trying to push the whole narrative that we need to be afraid of each other, sort of thing. And it's just like, okay, again, it was a pandemic. I understand that there was a necessity for certain parts of this sort of thing too, but I mean, I hope this is also a learning lesson for the powers that be to say, we can all agree that there was some mistakes made. I think we should all be big enough to understand that there are different ways to handle certain things, you know. And yes, this is definitely not the Spanish flu of 100 years ago, but at the same token, though, too, I mean, things weren't reported properly then either, just like they weren't reported properly for this one. So, you know, some of it's strictly on fear, some of it was because of money, some of it was because, you know, like there's a narrative to sell. Because, like, let's not kid ourselves, there were people that got rich during this. Is the other part. So, I mean, the fact that we're now allowed to live our lives and everybody's somewhat comfortable, yeah, it's going to be a slow transition for everybody to just be what we were, but I mean, what normal was has changed. So whatever are now the new normal, whatever everybody says, it's because it's alliteration doesn't mean it's a good phrase, but but I mean, it's that idea where we're all kind of refiguring out what society's supposed to be again. What do we do?
and a lot of it, like, it's kind of like hybrids. Like, if you were able to work from home, you should still be able to have that option if it's a better fit for you, like with your kids or like pets or whatever, significant others. But for me, like, really it helped not having live TV, no cable, no news. So I wasn't drilled into that. Like, yeah, I didn't really know what was going on until, like, I chose to hop online and find out the news. But at the same time, I'm like, it wasn't really too much affecting me, like, just through work regulations or changes in policy and things like that. But, yeah, for me, I just had to kind of limit myself. It's just like, I don't want this negative input. Yeah, we're going through, like, a lot of challenges, but I didn't need it put in my face every single day. Whether, different agenda or something, but yeah, just getting back to getting back to life, having whatever that may look like. I know for my business, we're doing it a hybrid because doing the Zoom calls really works. Like, especially long day, like, for me, it's kind of tough, like, to get back out and, like, do a half an hour drive or something. And even, like, my business partner last night was a little bit late getting on, but he was able to get on for the last half of it in Medicine Hat. So just, like, that proves, though, too, like, even in consulting, I would have Zoom calls or meetings, like, with places all over the world. So that really has helped get more comfortable. And I was, like, thinking, why am I not doing FaceTime? I used to FaceTime a long-distance relationship when I was 18. I'm like, we had this, but just more using these tools. And that was really what I kind of came down to, is, like, use these tools to make your life better. It'll shift a lot of industries. A lot of people lost their businesses, but you kind of have to maybe learn to adapt. There's new opportunities. There will be new industries, hopefully. There'll be that shift as people realize that we have that, like, 10 years to change the ocean temperature kind of thing. So we're like, okay, we can kind of shut down or slow down some things, or let's look at alternatives. And I think that is hope for the future.
Yeah, well, that's, I think, a really good way to look at it too. Instead of just, fully cranking up production on it and everything again, it's like, well, no, this is an opportunity again to change what we're doing. Mm-hmm. Like, the idea that we're doing this just because it was how we've always done things. Like, no, we've been given the grace of foresight now that we can see that we have certain things that are definitely not essential. That in itself is its own conversation. But we also understand, though, too, there is better ways to do things. Like you say, we have opportunity to change production and manufacturing ideas and stuff like that. And things have slowed down, but the world still kept going. We all still were able to, us anyways, fortunate to be where we are, that we were still able to eat. Our food production didn't slow down, but I also know for a fact that was at other people's expenses. We were lucky in the opportunity that we lost a little bit of production or ability to get some products and services. And in general, though, our world didn't really change that much, though, considering. And we've had new, better ways of doing things where it made sense when they offered, like, a lot of people that were surveyed said if they were given $30,000 to go back to their offices, would they? It's like, well, no. When you think about how much you spend on a vehicle or taking transit and how much time that costs, and then having to get up at a certain time so you can be at an office at a certain time, and then you're making lunches or buying lunches while you're at work, sort of thing like that. And, all this extra time that you're putting out, sort of thing. It's like, well, is that worth $30,000? Or is my sanity and my comfort worth some of it? Some people, they absolutely needed to have more social interaction. No problem. They'd have no problem going back to an office, but there's also a lot of people that never liked doing that in the first place. And they've been gifted this opportunity. It's like, I can still do my job from home, so just let me do that. And I think that's an easy example, but there's lots of things that have changed that way, sort of thing too. Where we're helping save not just certain aspects of the economy, but certain aspects of the environment now too, because we're not putting unnecessary vehicles on the road. You know, we're not manufacturing and throwing away extra plastic containers for seemingly no reason. You know, we can reduce things that aren't necessary. We don't need to have all these skyscrapers downtown. Or if we are, it's like, let's repurpose them for functional things now. Because, I mean, downtown Calgary was at, what was it, 25% vacancy before the pandemic? So it's like, things are already changing here. You know, and it's made it even more obvious that it's even less necessary to have all these structures, or at least being used the way that they are. So, yeah, it's good for lots of things. I think it's, again, it's not a crisis, it's an opportunity.
It's opportunity in every crisis.
Yeah. Agreed.
All right, so we get stretching.
Yes,
Moving?
we're at exactly 3 hours and about a minute.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Miss Damone.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming down.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Shut it down.
Okay.